Boris Johnson piles pressure on the Prime Minister as he hands over his pandemic WhatsApps.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 1st of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Ellie Costello and Peter Onker.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. And Rishi Sunak is facing a challenge from his predecessor Boris Johnson to hand over pandemic WhatsApps and diaries to the COVID inquiry. Ahead of a 4 p.m. deadline today, the former PM disclosed the material to the Cabinet Office.
ITV has instructed a barrister to investigate the circumstances around Philip Schofield's exit from This Morning. The external review is expected to take months and could see Schofield grilled about his affair with a much younger colleague.
The Prime Minister will use a meeting of European leaders in Moldova today to call for a joint response to illegal migration. He will also announce a new intelligence deal with Bulgaria, a key country for people smugglers entering Europe.
And are the kids all right? We'll investigate the crisis facing the younger generation in Britain and ask experts what can be done to put children on the right path for the future.
Yes, we're going to be talking a lot about children's discipline today, aren't we? We're going to be talking about Mizzy, the YouTuber. Has it all got out of hand? Has social media meant that our kids are deliberately misbehaving because they get attention for it? We're going to be talking about all of that sort of thing today. Pete's got some opinions on that as well. We want to hear your views, though. gbnews@gbnews.com. We do love to hear from you. To our top story now, and Boris Johnson has put pressure on the PM to hand over WhatsApps and diaries to the pandemic inquiry. It's after he gave the materials to the Cabinet Office in full and unredacted form.
The government is on course for an unprecedented legal battle with the inquiry if it misses the 4 p.m. deadline to disclose the documents.
Well, we're joined now by former advisor to Mr Johnson, Alex Crowley. Really good to see you this morning, Alex. Thank you for joining us. Now, Boris Johnson handing over all of his WhatsApps and diaries in full and unredacted form. This is a significant breakthrough, isn't it? And it breaks that deadlock that we've been talking about for the past few days.
It does, yes. It's been a very curious situation. It started with the government apparently saying that they wouldn't hand over his or all of his messages and his diaries, somewhat painting him as reluctant to do so. Of course, he's now fought back and said, well, actually, no, you can have it all. In fact, some of his people are saying, well, you've had all this material for months. What are you doing sitting on it? It puts the pressure back onto the government and ultimately, of course, back onto Rishi Sunak, because everyone at the moment has been focused on what's in Boris's messages. Of course, I think what's as interesting is, well, what's in all the other messages of the officials who were involved at the time, who are still in post, of course, quite a few of them, and, of course, current serving ministers, including Rishi Sunak, who will have also been in the messages because, of course, he was Chancellor during the pandemic and he was obviously closely involved in policy making at the time. So everyone has got something to lose here, and I suspect that's why we're seeing this little kind of standoff between the government and the inquiry.
And you know Boris probably better than most. How do you think he's feeling right now with all of this going on?
I think he'd be quite frustrated, actually. I think that he will be annoyed that he has been painted as somebody who's trying to block this. And by coming out yesterday and saying, here we go, you can have it all, he's now trying to reassert himself and he's trying to put the pressure back onto Rishi Sunak and the government.
Well, it is power play, isn't it? Because he has played this right over to Rishi Sunak. The ball is very firmly now in Rishi Sunak's court. Yep. What do you think will happen next? Do you think the Cabinet Office will meet this deadline at 4 p.m?
There is a part of me that thinks they might take it to the High Court.
OK.
Only because there is a bigger precedent that could be set here. Government is done by WhatsApp. It's done informally. A lot of official
Which is fascinating in itself, isn't it?
I mean, but it's always been like that. You know, you go back years, there were little conversations in smoky bars. There were Tony Blair's sofa government. There's always been an informal style of communication within government. Yesterday it was the sofa, today it's WhatsApp, tomorrow it'll be something else. And that's just how it works. And actually, there's nothing particularly wrong with that, because ministers need to have informal conversations where they disagree, so that they can ultimately then come out and pretend that they all agree with each other. That's just part of the process. if they hand over absolutely everything, then what does that mean for communication in government in the future?
And that's the dangerous precedent that the Cabinet Office just doesn't want to set. They want to have free and open communications. Should they be entitled to privacy in that sense?
So I think that not everything that happens within government should be open to the public. I know that might feel quite controversial because, of course, everyone instinctively feels that there should be transparency in government. And, of course, that's a very fine principle. But there is a case, and this is accepted, that there are some communications that should remain private so that policy making can happen properly. But there is a limit to that, especially when you've got a public inquiry about one of the biggest things that have happened in this country in many, many years. And obviously the balance should be, in this particular case, towards seeing as much as possible so that we can actually look at what happened and understand the mistakes and learn from it.
OK, and Rishi Sunak is in Moldova. What's on the agenda for that?
Well, this is part of Rishi Sunak's Stop the Boats pledge, one of his 5 points that he keeps talking about. And it's, international cooperation on that is extremely important, because if he can do deals with individual countries to return illegal immigrants in a safe and controlled way, then that is going to help deliver that policy.
So interesting, isn't it? Rishi Sunak's move away from channel migrants, if you like, and more towards stopping migrants at the source. That's what he seems to be focusing his efforts on now.
Yes, and it's a very sensible part of the strategy. I mean, it's sensible Sunak, isn't it? He's very good at this. He's very good at doing the sensible, fairly boring things. He doesn't do the big whiz-bang, paint a grand picture. He likes to sort of get into the detail. He does his homework, right? He delivers it on time. And this is just a part of this. Of course, it is a slight balancing act he has to do here. On the one hand, he's very tough on the boats. On the other, of course, it's basically government policy to allow overall legal migration numbers to rise. And he's having to balance those two things off against each other.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult. Alex, thank you so much. Really good to see you this morning.
Thank you.
Now, ITV has instructed a barrister to investigate the circumstances of Philip Schofield's departure from this morning.
The external review is expected to take months and could see Schofield grilled about his affair with a much younger colleague.
Well, last night, Kerry Katona spoke to Dan Wootton about her frustration that Philip Schofield was seemingly protected by ITV. Let's take a listen.
And I also want to talk about the likes of Caroline Flack on ITV2 on Love Island. She had an argument with her boyfriend and they asked her to step down like that. I get really angry and really annoyed, and I don't understand why Philip was still sat on that sofa for 3 years and ITV knew about it and Caroline took her own life. That really gets to me, and that needs to be really shouted about and voiced, because I don't understand that. And then I think the audacity, being condescending, belittling to people with real issues on the sofa. Who are they to give him the right for an opinion and tell them what's right or wrong?
Well, in a statement, the chief executive of ITV, Dame Carolyn McCall, said, "I want to reassure you that as a producer and broadcaster, ITV takes its responsibilities around duty of care and speaking up seriously, and has robust and well-established processes in place which allow anyone who works with us to raise concerns they may have anonymously."
OK, let's speak to showbiz reporter Ellie Phillips with her thoughts.
Ellie, we've just heard there a clip from Kerry Katona speaking quite emotionally, really, about her treatment. She believes she had unfair treatment on this morning by Philip Schofield. What do you make of her comments?
Yeah, I think, again, this is just more troubling news for ITV, who are desperately trying to contain the Philip Schofield scandal to kind of a one-off moment, if you will. And the more the time rumbles on until they come out and can be completely transparent about everything altogether, you've got people like Kerry Katona coming out and having their 2 pence. And also, as Kerry did, kind of widen the story and widen the anger from just kind of what people are saying or what she's saying or others are saying is a cover-up to actually the treatment of people in general by ITV, their duty of care, which obviously people were concerned about for the young runner in question who Philip had the affair with. They've said that they looked after him afterwards. They've offered him help. But as Kerry said, that wasn't always the case for all guests on there from her experience herself. She made some other damning comments about Philip Schofield, which I think are not just her. I think other people are going to say more stuff like that. However, I do think that what Caroline has said in terms of, Dame Caroline has said in terms of having this inquiry is a really good thing. The only way ITV, because it's not just this morning now, with everything that's happened, the conversation is about ITV daytime in general. The inquiry is the only way that they're going to have people move forward and be able to draw a line under this. So I really hope that the lawyers they've brought on are going to be given absolute full access to correspondence, to people who were there at the time, to all the records that they have to see what did you do, how did you investigate, what mistakes were made, how can things be better moving forward. And that's the only way that not just kind of viewers are going to be able to say, okay, we believe in you now, the show or the channel has integrity back, but also the investors, and most importantly to ITV, those advertisers. If they can't be seen as being trustworthy by the advertisers, then ITV have got a real problem on their hands.
OK, I mean, look, you know, I think it's important to show, too, and to say that there are people that have been working with ITV and on ITV for years that have never experienced anything bad. I'm one of those people. They've always been incredible, everyone. And you've got to think, too, that there's a lot more people involved in this, the staff, people that have worked there for so many years that have just been wonderful. And it's just important that we get both sides, I think. And, you know, Kerry's lovely and I've
100%. I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I've been on this morning. I've been on ITV daytime multiple times, and the people on the ground are fantastic. You cannot fault them. The friendliest bunch of people, really, really lovely to work with, welcoming, warm. However, I don't know that that necessarily speaks to what's happening at the very top, decisions that are being made. And I think it's important for people to realise that, you know, we speak about mental health at the moment. I'm personally, and I think many others are, worried about Philip Schofield's mental health, the runners' mental health, but also the people there on the ground who are now worried about their futures, the producers, the tea ladies, the green room staff, the makeup artists who are now worried for their future, something that they literally had nothing to do with. And that's really concerning because they don't know how their lives are moving forward well. So this has impacted so many people. And I think what is quite shocking about this is that what's coming out, and what I think, you know, ITV are trying to put forward, is that essentially Philip Schofield was living a double life and he was hiding it in plain sight, because this young man was a runner, he was his PA on the set, and so there were opportunities there that, you know, they would be left alone constantly, because that's normal practice. If that's your one-on-one producer and you need to run lines, you need them to go and get you things, you know, they are your go-to person. That, I'm not saying people turned a blind eye to it, but perhaps more procedures need to be put in place when the age specifically of someone that young is questionable. But also you have to remember, at the time that this was all happening, publicly and even privately, Philip Schofield was a heterosexual male working with a man. So I think had this runner at the time potentially been a woman of that age, maybe things have been done differently, because it would have been a question of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. But we have to remember, at the time this was going on, many years ago, he was publicly and privately a heterosexual male working with another male colleague. So were questions going to be asked in the same way that perhaps it would have been if it had been a woman at that point? So there are so many nuances to this, and I think people need to forget that this isn't something that happened yesterday. You know, this is a couple of years ago now. This runner was moved on back in 2020. So it's been 3 years since this all went on. And so when this is being looked at by the lawyers, they're not looking again at something that happened last week. This is something they're going to have to go through detailed correspondence from many years ago.
Yeah, and this is going to take months. Just quickly, Holly, what do you think? Is she going to be back on Monday? And if so, how long do you think she will be there?
If I were Holly, I wouldn't go back.
Oh.
Interesting. Okay.
So if I were Holly, I wouldn't go back. I think I would say, do you know what? Now's the time to move on, because she's so intrinsically linked to Philip Schofield when it comes to sitting on that sofa. I think she's a talent in her own right. She can do things on her own, but I find it hard that she's going to be able to shake the Phil and Holly from this morning, because they just fronted it together for such a long amount of time. However, as we've heard previously with other people who've been on ITV daytime, when they step down for whatever reason, their endorsement deals outside of ITV, they come into question, and advertisers aren't as keen to work on you as an individual brand, as an individual person, if you don't have that association with ITV Daytime, because that opens you up to such a huge audience. But on the other hand, with Holly, she's got a very powerful producer husband. She's talented. She is well liked. And I think actually moving forward, if she can break those ties with Philip and remind people that she's good as a solo presenter moving forward, I think that's a good move, because it's going to be too difficult for her to suddenly become ingrained as a duo with someone else on that sofa.
OK, Ellie Phillips, really good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on the latest in the Schofield saga. Very interesting what Ellie says about she wouldn't come back if she were Holly. You kind of agree, don't you? Tend to agree that she could do well elsewhere.
I just think it's not like an Ant and Dec situation where you don't see one without the other. You know, she's also good in her own right. You know, and I've seen her do loads of shows on her own. So I think wherever she goes, I think she's going to be fine.
Do you think she'll be back on Monday?
I think she'll be back on Monday, but whether she's back Monday week, I don't know. It's one of those. I think she might go back.
Could move quickly.
Yeah.
Well, it's moving quickly, like you say, it's moving quickly every day, isn't it? Right, the time is 16 minutes past 6. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
Police have launched an investigation into the deaths of 2 people following an incident in the water in Bournemouth yesterday. Emergency services attended the scene and 10 people were recovered from the water. A 17-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl sustained critical injuries. They both later died in hospital.
More than 1 million NHS staff in England are set to receive increased salaries and one-off payments from today. It's part of the latest pay deal. Nurses, paramedics and midwives are among those who will receive a 5% pay rise, backdated to April.
Bradford has been named as Britain's cheapest city to get on the property ladder. Property website Rightmove says the average price for a typical first-time buyer house in the Yorkshire city costs just under £104,000, whereas the average across Britain is over £226,000, an all-time high.
Now, this is pretty shocking stuff, and it's the stuff that got us talking this morning. Over half of people in the UK have never hosted a barbecue. What are you doing with your weekends?
That hurts.
The Aussie in the room is very, very upset about this. I mean, it's in your blood, isn't it, to barbecue?
And being Greek as well. So I think I mean, barbecues are they're not just about food. It's like when you say to someone, let's go and have a coffee. It doesn't mean you're going to actually have a coffee. It's about the atmosphere, all being together, the smells, the food, the shrimps. We don't.
The shrimp on the barbie.
You know, that's just a myth, don't you?
Really?
The shrimps on the barbie, I think, is just a myth.
Oh, is it? So you wouldn't do a shrimp on the barbie?
I would, but I don't think it's a typical thing. And the shrimps in Australia. But anyway.
Tell us your favourite food to have on a barbecue. What are the absolute essential items to have on the grill?
See, mixing the Greek and the Australian side, I throw everything on the barbie. Vegetables. Some people don't like vegetables on the barbie.
Well, no, you've got to have vegetables on the barbie.
Yeah,
what kind of veggies?
Everything. Everything from, I mean, peppers, mushrooms. Mushrooms, you put a bit of garlic and a bit of lemon. Bit of salt and pepper, and you just
stunning. I quite like a barbecue banana. Is that a bit rogue? Yeah, a bit rogue.
That's different.
That's good though. A bit of tin foil, and it goes kind of caramelised. Have it as the pudding and a bit of ice cream. Stunning. So do get in touch. Are you one of these half of the population that's never barbecued? I mean, we're very confused by that this morning. If you haven't barbecued, why? And if you do like to barbecue, tell us your top tips, so that other people can feel confident in doing so. What should be the food items on the grill? Do you have any, ideas of getting it warmed up, that kind of thing? I know it's a lot of hard work, isn't it, to host a barbecue?
I'm still just thinking here that I read a statistic, 14% of Brits have never, ever, ever had a barbecue. Never been to one, never.
Oh, I didn't even read into the fine detail.
Come on, I'm on this. This is hurting me deep.
That's a national scandal.
I should do a barbecue for those 14%.
Yeah, you should.
Hopefully, it was only about 20 people that were investigated. Then I should do it.
No, you should host it at your house. I think that's a very good idea. 14%. You're not wrong. I mean, unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
God,
very good. Very, very good.
That wasn't one of mine.
Do let us know, get in touch on any of the stories that we're talking about today, but we especially want to hear about your barbecues. Are you barbecuing? Hopefully you will be, because we've got some good weather on the way, haven't we, Pete?
We absolutely do. The UK is set for sunshine this weekend, yes, ahead of what is expected to be a scorching summer.
Well, weather journalist and our friend Nathan Rowe is here to tell us what we can expect for the rest of the month. And summer is on its way, Nathan.
You're not going to get a shrimp on the barbie for the next 2 weeks, at least.
No,
really. At least in the east of the country, the west is getting it better. But in the east, we're pretty stuck with it. It's the first day of summer today. Happy first day of summer. Feels more like autumn, but we're stuck in this sort of pretty cool, pretty grim weather, at least in the east of the country, for the next 2 weeks, according to the Met Office. But it might be on the way after that.
Well, I'm confused, because I thought it was meant to be 21, 22, 23 this week.
Possibly will be. The west of the country, we've got a bit of an east-west split. So the west of the country is going to get the best of the weather. So if you take the Midlands and cut them down the middle and go westwards, Wales, Cumbria, that sort of area, even Scotland, they've had some pretty good temperatures this week. In fact, Wales had 25 this week. The east, though, completely different. I mean, I've got my winter coat on still coming.
Have you?
Can I go back to something you just said? You said in 2 weeks it might change. We need just a little bit more. We need a bit more assertion.
Right. There is something very interesting going on with the weather, meteorologically, during the month of June. Again, according to the Met Office, have to attribute to the Met Office. Their long-range forecast, we were talking about a couple of weeks ago about how there was a 35% chance of a hotter-than-average summer. It's gone up to 45% now, double the normal chance of getting the hotter-than-average summer. That's right the way through to August. Now, hotter-than-average doesn't actually mean there's going to be heat waves and, really hot. Hotter-than-average just really means we could pull in some hotter temperatures than our average, only around 20. But there is a typhoon hitting Guam and is heading on the way to Okinawa, the southern islands of Japan, that the Met Office think might interact with the jet stream as it comes around the globe towards us. The jet stream is at the moment weak, so keeping this blocked colder pattern, and that might jolt the jet stream around the middle of June and bring a change to the weather. Now, the Met Office also said that could go two ways. It could either be a nice warm spell if it draws up warmer air from the south, or it might be cooler. But other than that, we're stuck in this.
I mean, last summer we saw the 40-degree heat wave, didn't we? I mean, that was extreme heat in this country.
Yes.
Do you think that could be on the cards for this summer, or was that one-off?
Well, it's happened once, so it can happen again. Now, the argument is that the summers are getting warmer because of global warming, because of various things happened. We've had 40 degrees once. There's no reason why we shouldn't have it again. There are some people saying that we could get a hot summer. The Met Office has said heat waves are not guaranteed, but they are more likely than not. Now, a heat wave 10 years ago used to be, 30 degrees. It is now 35, heading up to 40. Could it happen again? It could. Is it likely? I don't think it's likely, but it might.
And what dangers does high temperatures bring? I mean, what could people look out for, or what should they do?
Yeah, so always when the hot weather comes, we're never prepared for it. Usually it's the same with the cold weather. Animals in cars, people in cars can turn into ovens. So that's my why one is, please do not animals in cars. Elderly, vulnerable, people with health conditions. When the temperatures rise above 30, 35 degrees, that's when people really suffer. So just bear it in mind, when on the very, very hot days, like we had last year, that 40 degrees C, don't go out running. Health experts recommend things like closing the curtains, looking out for elderly, vulnerable people, that they're not struggling, dehydration, exercising outdoors, that sort of thing. Just be sensible. And my biggie is open water. Never, ever, we see it every single year, people jumping into reservoirs and lakes and things. There's always tragic headlines afterwards. So open bodies of waters are always a bad idea in the summer as they are in the winter.
Yeah, Nathan, really, really important that you stress that. It's a really important message. I mean, we just had that headline, didn't we, about the two people that died in Bournemouth. It's absolutely tragic. So thank you for mentioning that. Really good to see you this morning.
Shame
it's not happier news, though. I want it to be boiling hot.
I mean, not yet, but hang in there. We might.
All right.
We should.
He said
Stay
might
tuned.
again. He said might.
Might. We don't like that word. We want to soak up the sun. But anyway.
Right, after the TikTok user Mizzy was accused of breaking a court order by posting social media videos, following his release from prison, we'll ask if social media is teaching children bad behaviour. Next.
First First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the people's channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the people's channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. The time is 6:26. Still lots to come on today's programme. Just after 7 o'clock, we're going to be bringing you the latest housing figures as the Prime Minister faces pressure to bring back the Help to Buy scheme.
And before 7:30, as job vacancies remain stubbornly high in Britain, we'll ask if more kids should get summer jobs or if the best way to build character is to let them enjoy their holidays.
And please do get in touch all the usual ways this morning. We'd love to hear from you. We're talking, of course, the Schofield saga, and we're appalled at new research out from Sainsbury's that says half of people in the UK have never hosted a barbecue, and you had an even worse statistic.
14% have never even been to a barbecue. That one got me.
Yeah, I bet it did. As an Aussie and as a Greek, you are offended this morning. So do get in touch. If you're one of those people who's never been to a barbecue, why? Where have you been? Every sunny weekend ever. And also, if you do like to barbecue, what do you put on your grill? What is the absolute essential items to have at a barbecue? Do let us know. GBnews at gbnews.com.
Though many would argue that social media has a host of useful purposes, it's definitely not without its drawbacks.
Yes, apps like Instagram and TikTok are guilty of platforming countless problematic images, videos and trends. So the question is, how do we keep our children safe amid the unregulated Wild West that is social media in 2023?
Well, this morning we're joined by child development psychologist Dr. Amanda Gummer, as well as child safety online expert Jessica Chalmers, who are both here to discuss how children can utilise social media in a positive and constructive way. Amanda, let's start with you. Is social media to blame for unruly kids?
No, that's far too simplistic. It has issues and we do need to learn to manage it, but you can't blame social media for children's behaviour or, as you say, unruly kids. It's not that simple.
I mean, obviously, it's really difficult when you're a parent trying to stop your children going on social media. I've had that experience where, you know, you try and stop them and then you find that they're at school and they're going on their friend's phone to get on social media anyway. So inevitably, you kind of give in to it. But it's how do we protect them? Because social media, you get everything you want, but you also get everything you don't want. And if you search something, the algorithms will change and then all of a sudden you're getting shown more of that or anything that's sort of related to any words that you've used. And it can just open a Pandora's box.
Yeah, so I think there's some really key tips for parents to take on board. And the first thing is, the platforms have an age limit for a reason. There are emotional and social and cognitive developments that need to happen in a child before they are able to handle what's going on and make that difference between a real world and a digital world. So I think, keeping kids offline until they're sort of early teens is definitely a good thing. But there are safe spaces for children to start exploring the online world that are specifically kid-friendly. And I think, introducing them to that, but also doing it gradually, like you do with anything with children. Start, give them the training wheels. So you're their friend when they first have an account. You have their password when they first have a phone. That's the deal at which this happens, and they have to earn their independence and their privacy, and they do that by showing that they can use it responsibly. And the other thing, and I think this is probably the most important thing, is having great communication with your kids as they grow up, so that when they do find something online that they don't understand, or that worries them, or that they find disturbing, you're the first person that they talk to about it, and they don't go deeper into the web to try and find answers.
Absolutely agree with you what you're saying, but I think it goes deeper than that, in the sense that, I remember when my daughter was 13 and she got TikTok when it first came out. I think it used to be called Musical.ly or something like that. And she was on it, and then she got banned from it because she wasn't allowed to be on it. So they open another account under a different name. We don't know this as parents, and they're getting blocked constantly. So obviously they're trying to do this, but kids find ways. That's the scariest part. And of course, if any of these children are self-critical about themselves, or, because obviously you find good things on these social media, but, the body image of Instagram, if you feel self-confident and you're critical about yourself, it can only make it worse. If you're looking at things that don't make you feel good about yourself. So how can they tackle it?
Sorry, I was going to say, which is why we advocate this balanced play diet approach. So social media and screen time is absolutely fine, but it has to go into the mix of a healthy, balanced play diet. So kids are getting lots of face-to-face play time with their mates. They're getting lots of active play. They're getting lots of imaginative, free, child-led play, and they're the superfoods of the play diet. So if your child is getting that, they're more likely to be resilient. They're more likely to have positive body image. They're more likely to have healthy real life relationships, so they're going to be less vulnerable to some of the toxicity that you see online. So I think making sure that children, if they are using social media, that they're doing it in a managed, limited way, in the same way that you don't let your kids eat sweets and chips for every meal. It's part of a balanced diet, but it's an okay part, but it just needs managing.
Jessica, let's bring you in at this stage, because something that really concerns me, I use TikTok, I really like it actually for things like recipes, but the algorithms seem to be really, really intelligent. They notice what you're watching, what you're lingering over, and if a child stumbles across harmful content like pro-anorexia content or pornography, the phone, the tablet, whatever you're watching it on, will feed you more of the same content, won't it? And that is a really slippery slope, and it's very, very difficult to manage.
Yeah, that is the problem with social media. The longer you linger on a content, the more it will show you. And of course, with young people, if something is shocking, they're going to linger longer on that, which is a problem. My advice would be to talk to your children about the potential dangers of the online world, and educate them and guide them on what to do if they come across, any of these dangers. And the big thing I'd say is to kind of teach your children to block and report accounts, and talk to a trusted adult. If they see something which makes them feel weird inside or makes them feel sad, talk to a parent or a trusted adult.
So I just wanted to bring in someone like, say, Andrew Tate, okay, who is a very intelligent person, and some of the things he says are clever, and some of the things he says might be okay, but then along with that, he'll also put views in that are not quite right for kids to hear, and the whole misogynist side and that side of it. So what do you do when someone is clever and they're saying things that are true, and you're thinking, OK, that's great, but then they add in all their views that aren't right? This is a really tough to navigate as a parent, and to see your kids kind of being influenced by, you know, Andrew Tate, Mizzy, for example, who's just been arrested.
Yeah, it's a big problem. And I think one of the things parents need to do is, it's a simple thing, but it's to talk to your children, you know, cultivate a conversation, talk to them all the time about, you know, about their online lives, whether it's asking questions like, you know, how's your Minecraft world coming along, or what made you laugh on TikTok, or what was funny on YouTube? Because if we talk about the everyday, then they're used to having that conversation with us. And if they do come across something like Andrew Tate, they'll be more open to having that conversation with us.
And I just wanted to ask you about, Amanda, about Mizzy. So this is the YouTuber who plays pranks on people, those pranks, some of them being quite serious, like stealing people's dogs or going into somebody's house without permission. Those people have young kids, and it's absolutely terrifying them. And those videos then go viral. He's actually been in court over this twice now. But there is a worry, isn't there, that we are feeding the beast, that social media, that followers, that likes, it just encourages that sort of controversial behaviour.
Yeah, completely. And I think, you know, the media has a role to play in, you know, choosing what stories it reports and how it reports them. And I think, you know, giving this airtime puts it on more people's radars, so they're going to check it out, and then it becomes a, you know, it grows out of control, and that becomes, you know, they've won then, haven't they? They've served their purpose.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think Mizzy has apologised since then, but the problem is the damage is done a lot of the times, and it just seems to it seems to be an open book for anyone to do whatever they want. And you really think these big companies have got a handle on it, and they do put safety measures in place, but they're just not strong enough. Definitely agree with you too, Jessica, about being able to talk to them and just ask them questions about what they were watching and almost do it in a friendly way. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Jess, what would you say is the best response to someone like Mizzy? I mean, children, teenagers are really exposed to his videos at the moment. How do you explain that to children and protect them from the sorts of things that he's doing?
Well, I think a good thing to talk to your children about as a parent is to remind them, you know, that what Mizzy's doing is unacceptable, but also to remind them about their digital footprint, and, you know, which basically the moment they make their first post or comment online, it's going to follow them for the rest of their lives. And I think if they're aware of that, and they maybe want to go to job one day or go to university one day, if they know that everything that they're posting online and commenting online is going to stay with them, that might make them think twice about, you know, following and thinking what Mizzy's doing is a good thing.
You know, where are the parents in all of this? I mean, you know, everyone's saying, oh, the law's not strong enough and, you know, the law's weak and all that. But where are the parents? I mean, if I did something like that, my dad, boy, I mean, where are the parents sort of going out and saying, look, what my son has done is absolutely unacceptable. I apologise on his behalf. He's going to be reprimanded, whatever. But you don't hear that. It's just about whether the law are tough enough or not. But we've got parents that we have to take some responsibility here, or at least, you know, to discipline them in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the issues that I'm seeing with modern day parenting, I guess, is parents don't want their children to fail in any way. They don't want them to, so they get them out of binds. We're actually, children need to learn natural consequences. So if they do something wrong, then they do need to go and apologise to the neighbour and put it right and offer to mow the lawn or to do whatever it is, and to show that they actually they understand that they've done something wrong and that they're sorry. And I think parents are quite quick to not have their child labelled as naughty one or come across, you know, negatively in any situation. So they overcompensate, and I think they overprotect the children from natural consequences of their behaviour. I think it's a really important tool for children to learn that behaviours have consequences.
OK, Amanda, Jessica, we've got to leave it there, I'm afraid, but a really fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for your company. You will certainly have a view on that at home, gbviews@gbnews.com. Let us know what you think, but do stay with us, because we're going to discover why Bulgaria could help Rishi Sunak tackle the small boats crisis. We'll be going through Thursday's papers with Freddie Gray and Nikki Hodgson. That's next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching. Welcome back. The time is 6:42. Let's bring you up to date with today's front pages.
The Telegraph focuses on more than 50 Tory MPs who are demanding Rishi Sunak scraps inheritance tax, claiming it's morally wrong.
The Times says Britain will target Turkey and Bulgaria in an effort to tackle the small boats crisis, as the PM urges European leaders to make legal migration their top priority.
And the Mail continues its coverage of the This Morning meltdown as ITV are forced to order an independent probe into Philip Schofield's departure.
The Express claim that Animal Rising activists are planning to ruin this weekend's Epsom Derby.
And The Sun believe Harry and Meghan have decided to stop their TV and book sniping and will no longer publicly criticise the royal family.
Will it be peace at last? Well, we're going to be joining us to go through these stories is the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and author Nikki Hodgson. Really good to see you both this morning. Good morning to both of you. And Freddie, let's start with this story in The Times that Britain is going to target Turkey and Bulgaria in order to tackle the small boats crisis.
Well, this is it. Rishi Sunak is speaking to European leaders today. And the big story, the papers are leading on, is that we're going to target Bulgaria and Turkey because apparently there's 1 million refugees ready to leave Turkey. And often with these stories, you wonder, what do you mean target? Because it's going to be intelligence sharing between the governments, apparently, as to what's going on with people smuggling and so on. And you do wonder, I thought this was already happening. Surely we already talked to the Turkish government about refugees. Surely we already talked to Bulgaria about refugees. And in fact, I know that we do. So I think what this story is really about is the European political community, which is meeting today. And this is what Britain is hoping will be our part, post-Brexit, our part in Europe, that we're going to have this European political community where we deal with European issues together. And so Rishi Sunak, I think, is trying to get on the front foot and say, I'm going to take a lead in a major issue for Europe, which is migration, illegal migration, and so on.
See, I think this is quite interesting. I think this is a move away from focusing on the French. You were saying, do we have conversations with Turkey? I mean, I think we do. But we focus our conversations with the French, don't we, and on the Channel, whereas this is more a move towards stopping migration at its source, which
Yes.
makes sense.
And it's also stealing a little bit from what Labour are talking about, because Labour are very much, we need to target the people smugglers. That's the real problem. That's quite an effective line with the public, because it sort of feels morally OK to talk about it. And so I think the Tories are stealing a bit of a march on that. And I think intelligence sharing is obviously a good idea when you've got gangs smuggling enormous numbers of people into the country, into various countries. I think it's good for governments to talk to each other. So obviously good news. It's just a bit of an odd one, because you think, why isn't the government already doing it?
OK, Nikki, The Telegraph talks about inheritance tax.
Yes, so The Telegraph is not a fan of inheritance tax. It calls it a death tax. So at the minute, inheritance tax is set at £325,000. So when you die, if you've got assets, you know, house, money in the bank account, whatever, you're paying on properties, you're paying inheritance tax on a property that's worth a certain amount over. What's really important to say is that actually 93% of people in this, like, of estates in this country don't come anywhere near that amount of money. So actually, the majority of people won't pay it. But for the people that do, the problem is that house prices have been rising and they've never kind of talked about re-examining the threshold for the past 10 years. So basically, more people in the middle class are kind of having to pay this amount of money. And they're just, you know, this really goes against what the Tories believe, which is that if you make money in your lifetime, you should be allowed to pass it on to your family or children, and their children should be allowed to benefit from your hard work. It's interesting that it's almost kind of taken so long for them to kind of get really up in it again as an issue. I think it's like a very classic Tory policy to want to abolish this. And it's kind of good timing for them thinking about going into the election next year and what kind of issues are going to resonate with Tory voters. I mean, the only thing that's kind of a bit tone deaf in the piece, really, is Jacob Rees-Mogg, as ever, in my opinion. I'm not a fan of him, and he knows that as well. He just sort of said, well, it only raises a modest amount for the economy, but that modest amount is still £7.1 billion every year, and in a time of, you know, cost of living crisis and we're desperate to find places where we can rake in money. I mean, that isn't small fry to me. So, you know, but I mean, I think the majority of people watching, you know, my dad died nearly 10 years ago. We didn't get anywhere near that amount of inheritance, you know, threshold, you know. So for lots of people, it just won't even be an issue because they just don't have the money anyway.
But it is popular. I mean, do you remember George Osborne dangled it as an idea?
Yes,
and just dangling it as an idea caused a huge boost for the Tories in the polls. So I think, you know, this is obviously going to be a carrot that the Tories are going to pull out
absolutely
before the next election, because it's popular. And even as you say, Nikki, most people aren't affected by it. The people that are affected by it will
are very
vote for a
interested
party.
in it, yeah. And it's a very Tory policy, that's what you're saying.
Yes.
And, like, most Tories can get on board with this policy. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
OK, Freddie, let's take a look at the latest in the Philip Schofield saga.
Yes,
now, this is
goes on and on, doesn't it?
It certainly does, yes. The ITV investigation is now going to be an external one.
Yes, well, they're bringing in a barrister. Normally, companies hire a solicitor, but they're bringing in a barrister to conduct some sort of investigation. Holly Willoughby's going to be questioned. That's one of the details. And, I mean, I'm running out of things to say about Philip Schofield. I don't know if you guys are.
Well, I think the story's running away from him as well, isn't it? It's become about ITV and ITV's culture.
Yes, well, I think there's a sense that there are more allegations to come. We don't know exactly what those are, but they are about to start landing, we believe. Katie Hind, who's written this splash for the Daily Mail, is supposed to be sitting on all sorts of terrible scoops. But who knows? I mean, who knows? We don't know until we know. And for now, we can just... the focus of the story is ITV, the cover-up. You know, there's a sort of sense that this is ITV's Jimmy Savile scandal, that they were sort of sitting on it. Again, I think those comparisons are slightly overdone. I mean, so far we don't know that he's not a Jimmy Savile figure.
He hasn't committed any crime that anyone knows of or anything like that. So it's a difficult...
And it's one of these stories, and I realise I'm saying this on the media, when it's the media talking about the media and it becomes this sort of inferno of gossip. And that's what we're doing. We're now gossiping about it now. But
to be fair, people are talking about it as well. I mean, you had a taxi driver this morning who was talking to you about it.
I did. A taxi driver said to me, he said, I don't understand what the problem is. You know, even our weatherman, Nathan, said he put a tweet out saying, if it's something illegal, let the police deal with it. If it's something not illegal, then let the family deal with it. But I can understand that there's other parts to this, is what is getting people's interest of, you know, deceit and so on. But when it actually comes down to it, you wonder who, you know, this is blowing way out of proportion.
I agree. And I think there's something very odd in modern Britain where there's a sort of bipolarity about our emotions. So when Philip Schofield came out as gay, everybody said, you know, great, good for you. You've come out as gay. It's a very difficult decision. Great. You know, you're married, but still that's a good thing. And then suddenly now we have this, and it's like, oh, you're evil. You're a sort of terrible person. He's not either of those things. He's somewhere in between, like most human beings.
No, but Freddie, like we say, it's the deceit. And, you know, from anybody else that knew about that story, they feel that, you know, they were lied to and they were kind of sequestered into his coming out. I mean, look, I'm bisexual, and the idea for me that he used being gay as a smokescreen for something else that was going on, I find really offensive. So, you know, the LGBTQI community does not need anybody else to say they're gay when actually there's something else that they're trying to hide at the same time, because, you know, so many people think so many negative things anyway about queer people. So that's the bit that irks. And also, it's not that he then went on to do loads of campaigning work for LGBTQI rights. He didn't. So, you know, and I'm not saying he had to either, but the point is, like, he used that to kind of detract from this other story that was going on. And that's why people are offended.
Yeah, that is a good point, actually. Yeah. OK, with you, Nikki. The Sun, Harry and Meghan, to stop making... Do you think they're actually going to stop?
No, I don't. I don't think they're going to stop making any documentaries. So, yeah, so this is the story that basically Harry and Meghan have sort of run out of things to say about the royal family. So they're going to stop making those documentaries they were making for Netflix and, you know, stop publishing books, etc. I mean, they really have kind of, I don't know, scrape the barrel. I don't really see what else they can say or do at this point with what they did. And, you know, Spare was the tell-all. And I also think it's tactically because Meghan wants to go back into her influencing work. She's going to relaunch her blog, The Tig. And they do have to move on with their lives, don't they? Because even if they are still angry and upset and grieving that old life, people have kind of lost patience with that story. They don't really think there's anything more for them to say. And for them, they need to move on. They need to move into the future, and they need to move into a new life with their children and be thinking about what they're going to do next, you know, and what they're going to be known for next. They can't be known as the people that kind of, you know, blew open the stuff around the royals. They've got to be seen as contributing in a different way.
I think they know that interest is running out.
Yeah.
I mean, we at The Spectator, we regularly written pieces about Harry and Meghan, and they used to do a hell of a lot of traffic. There's always been a lot of interest in them. That's started to decline now. You can't sort of guarantee a Harry and Meghan story is going to make massive waves anymore.
No.
And so now the story is that they know that they're not interesting anymore.
Now the story is there'll be no more stories.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll find a way of...
So it started with Spare, and now they're going to do one called Spare Us.
Exactly.
Well, there's more books in the pipeline, actually, so I'm not quite sure if this
Well, Prince William's going to do... I thought Prince William should do a book and just call it Air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is going on? Yeah.
He was a Yorkshire Prince, something like me, but, you know.
Freddie, Nikki, really good to see you this morning. You'll be back in the next hour. Now, the government is facing criticism over the dropping of its flagship animal welfare bill that includes protections for pets, farm and zoo animals.
The bill would have included a live export ban as well as proposals to tackle puppy smuggling. And its scrapping has led to accusations that the government is turning its back on animals.
Well, our political reporter Catherine Forster has the story.
So we are a nation of animal lovers.
So said Environment Minister Mark Spencer last week. Then moments later announced that the government's flagship animal welfare bill for kept animals was being ditched. 2 years after it was first introduced by then Environment Secretary George Eustice. Conservative MP Andrea Jenkins is planning a petition to debate bringing back the bill.
We must deliver on these. I mean, we're a nation of animal lovers, and when we saw that the net migration targets were dropped, which was a manifesto commitment, and now this, you know, we need to get the confidence and trust of the British people, and so therefore I think we should deliver on our manifesto promises.
Under Boris Johnson, the Conservatives had made animal welfare a priority. His wife, Carrie, is a passionate animal lover and has worked for the conservation charities, the Aspinall Foundation and Oceana. Their dog, Dylan, was rescued from a Welsh puppy farm. Zach Goldsmith, perhaps the original Vote Blue, Go Green Tory, was an environment minister. And Johnson's father, Stanley, is a long-standing campaigner.
3 million whales were killed.
So the Conservative manifesto in 2019 included promises to crack down on puppy smuggling, ban primates being kept as pets, and, notably, ban live animal exports, something that was impossible as members of the European Union, but a Brexit freedom now. The bill would have made good on all these promises.
Unfortunately, this multi-issue nature means that there's been considerable scope creep. The bill risks being extended far beyond the original commitments.
During last year's Conservative leadership campaign, Rishi Sunak pledged his support, but the government has now dropped it, blaming the opposition for playing political games, concerned they would try to strengthen the ban on hunting, a topic which still divides Tory MPs. The news was widely condemned, and not just by animal charities and opposition MPs. The government maintains the key measures will still be brought in. Here's Mark Spencer again.
Therefore, we'll be taking forward measures in the Kept Animals Bill individually during the remainder of this Parliament.
With a general election approaching, the government is running out of time to make good on its promises. Politicians, charities and animal lovers up and down Britain will be watching. Catherine Forster, GB News.
Such a cute dog.
So cute.
So lovely. But let us know what you think about that story, because it is a concern to lots of animal lovers all across the country. GBNews at gbnews.com. But do stay with us, because we'll have more on Boris Johnson's challenge to the Prime Minister as the deadline to hand over pandemic WhatsApp approaches.
But first, here's your forecast with Alex Deakin.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a dull start for most of us, but I'm reasonably optimistic that for many, grey skies will turn blue through the day today. Thanks to this, a chunky area of high pressure which has been dominating our weather all week and will continue to control our weather into next week, keeping things mostly dry. Now, out there this morning, the cloud is thick enough in places for a little bit of light rain and drizzle, and the cloud has moved in across much of the country through the night, but West Wales, northwest Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland having a sunny start, and the cloud will retreat back to the east through the day. So the Midlands, southern parts of England, northwest England, southern Scotland, all brightening up, but this eastern coast may well stay pretty glum and pretty chilly with a breeze coming in from the sea. Elsewhere, further west, top temperatures getting into the low 20s once more, feeling pretty pleasant with fairly light winds. Now, through this evening and overnight, look what happens. The cloud comes back in overnight, back in across the Midlands, into southern Scotland, eventually into Wales and western parts of England as well. Clearer skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland may allow a bit of mist and fog. And it's here where we'll see the lowest temperatures getting down into single figures, well down in some rural spots. But most places across England and Wales start tomorrow at 9 or 10, just like this morning. We'll start with a lot of cloud as well. But again, that cloud should break up quite quickly, I fancy, tomorrow through the morning. And although some parts of the east coast may stay glum, much of eastern England looking a bit brighter on Friday. Better chance of seeing lengthier spells of sunshine as we go through the day. Again, there'll still be a breeze coming in from the sea, so even if we see more sunshine, it'll still be cooler in the east. Further west, that's where, again, we'll see temperatures over 20 degrees, although generally just a degree or so down on today's values. That high pressure isn't going anywhere. It sticks around through the weekend and beyond, so a lot more dry weather to come, even well into next week. Goodbye.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Boris Johnson piles pressure on the Prime Minister as he hands over his pandemic WhatsApps.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Thursday, the 1st of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Ellie Costello and Peter Andre.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. And Rishi Sunak is facing a challenge from his predecessor, Boris Johnson, to hand over pandemic WhatsApps and diaries to the COVID inquiry. Ahead of a 4 p.m. deadline today, the former PM disclosed the material to the Cabinet Office.
ITV has instructed a barrister to investigate the circumstances around Philip Schofield's exit from this morning. The external review is expected to take months and could see Schofield grilled about his affair with a much younger colleague.
The Prime Minister will use a meeting of European leaders in Moldova today to call for a joint response to illegal migration. He will also announce a new intelligence deal with Bulgaria, a key country for people smugglers entering Europe.
And are the kids all right? We'll investigate the crisis facing the younger generation in Britain and ask the experts what can be done to put children on the right path for the future.
Well, loads of you getting in contact this morning. I don't think I've ever seen so many emails so early on in the show. Loads of people very, very excited about a certain Mr. Peter Andre being in the studio.
Mum again, isn't it?
No, I think there's a fair few more than just mum. Liz says, love Peter Andre on the show. Ed, good morning, Ellie and Andre. Andre, it's a new one.
Love that.
You two are doing a great job this week. It's worth staying up late for because Ed is in Virginia in the US, which I believe is 5 hours behind. So, yeah, 2 a.m. there. Barbara says, can I just say what a good job Peter Andre is doing presenting with Ellie. He's a natural. His tone of voice is very professional and easy to listen to. And Paul says that he met you once at a health spa in Cheshire. You're such a nice guy and you made my partner's weekend. You are now doing such a great job on GB News and I hope you do much more. Ellie is professional and on point. Keep up the great work, both of you. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Very, very kind.
All those lovely words.
Well, I've got one from Danny here, and he says, great to see Pete presenting. He's a great bloke. Thank you very much. But this bit I love. Funny to think that 30 years ago, I couldn't stand him. I love that. But then he went on to explain why, but let's not worry about that.
Continue.
But Danny, love you, mate. Thank you very much. I can mention quite a few people that can't stand me at the moment, but let's not go into that. But thank you for saying that.
I think you should finish the rest of that email.
OK, he said, but that might have had something to do with the fact that every girl I knew fancied him. But do you notice it's fancied? Past tense now. I can
you're
accept this.
focusing
I can
too
accept
much.
this. Do you see how focused? I hyper-focused on that one bit. No, that's really, really nice. But barbecue stuff. Have a listen to this. Great stuff. Roy says, good morning. We love a barbecue. We had 3 months in Adelaide with our son who lives there. He did everything on the barbie. We tried to do one last weekend, but the wind kept on blowing it out. So, Peter, we finished up indoors. Yes, the bloody English weather... Oh, am I allowed to say that?
Well, you've said it.
Sorry?
Sorry if
yes,
you're offended by the word bloody.
English weather stops us. So import some Aussie weather, please. Well, it might be coming according to...
Yeah, Nathan.
Yeah,
it might be a bit delayed, though. Yeah, it's because half of British people have never had a barbecue. It's according to new research from Sainsbury's, which we're appalled by, aren't we?
And 14% have never even been to a barbecue. I mean, I don't know how many people they interviewed, but 14%'s a lot. Okay.
And who didn't they interview? I mean, that's what I want to know.
Yeah. Now, Jonathan here says, hey, Ellie and Peter, I have been to a friend's Greek barbecue and it was amazing. Oppa. Full of lamb on the spit roast and steaks. 200 guests at the annual garden. Can I tell you something about this?
Yeah.
Jonathan, do you know in Cyprus what they used to do is they used to close the village and anyone that was within the village would be invited to the barbecue, right? Wow. So they would just have rows. They still do it sometimes. They would have rows and rows and rows of barbecues and just meat cooking, so the whole village was invited.
Like massive street party.
I love that, but it lives in Canada now and we barbecue all year round, even when it's minus 20 degrees. Love your enthusiasm.
You're doing Pete proud this morning, so keep those views coming in. We've got loads and loads to go through. We'll be sharing them throughout the programme. GBNews at gbnews.com. Now, Boris Johnson has put pressure on the PM to hand over WhatsApps and diaries to the pandemic inquiry after he gave the materials to the Cabinet Office in full and unredacted form.
The government is on course for an unprecedented legal battle if it misses the 4 p.m. deadline to disclose the documents.
Well, we're joined now by former advisor to Mr Johnson, Alex Crowley. Alex, this is significant, isn't it? It's a significant development because it breaks the deadlock that we've seen in the past few days.
Yes, it does. It's a row that didn't really need to happen. Of course, it started with the Cabinet Office saying, well, we're not handing over Boris's material because... And there was some suggestion that he didn't want them to hand it over. He's now taken the initiative and said, well, actually, you can have it all. Here it is. You've had it for months. So why aren't you handing it over? Putting the pressure back on the government. There's a lot of people here, including senior officials, not just ministers, but officials as well, who have a lot to lose here. Because if everything is published, then we're going to see the inner workings of government, perhaps in a way that we haven't seen before. And that is going to potentially embarrass a lot of people. But it's necessary because we need to understand what happened. It was an unprecedented situation and we need to learn from it.
Yeah, obviously, you know, there are people that are saying that WhatsApp messages, whether you're working in the government or not, should be private. But of course, he's in a position of authority. So, I mean, you know him better than most. What do you think he's feeling about this?
I think he'll be quite frustrated that he's been portrayed as somebody who's trying to block the access to this material and is trying to block the progress of the inquiry. I don't think he will have liked that. And I think that's why he's come out now and done what he's done, which is to say, here it is, warts and all. If you want it, go and get it. But, of course, it's up to the Cabinet Office to give it to the inquiry, because, of course, he will claim is that the inquiry hasn't actually asked him directly. Slight semantics.
So has Boris thrown Rishi under the bus?
I think, having been thrown under the bus himself, he is now attempting to take a few people down with him.
OK, because it is going to be very, very interesting what happens next, because there are 40 names on this list, these WhatsApp conversations, Rishi Sunak, of course, being one of them. And as you say, those people on that list, they have a lot to lose. And Rishi Sunak, the current Prime Minister, it is safe to say, as you just touched upon there, there's no love lost between Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. So do you think he'll be nervous about what these conversations could reveal about him?
Potentially. I mean, he was obviously Chancellor at the time. He was closely involved in all of the discussions and the decision-making, and he may well be worried at this point. There may well be other ministers that are worried, and as I say, there will be senior officials who are worried. And I think if this all comes out, we're going to see just how much power unelected officials have over the whole process.
How likely do you think it is that the Cabinet Office will meet this 4 p.m. deadline?
I think it's touch and go. I think that they have a very tough decision to make. If they reveal it all, they're setting a massive precedent for publication potentially in the future of other processes of decision-making. They may well be the lawyers who want to try and put some limit on that. If they do, they're going to have to go to the High Court and challenge it there.
And if that happens, that's going to be absolutely unprecedented, isn't it? I mean, the government going to court against a public inquiry, a very important one that you stressed earlier. I mean, this could potentially be huge.
Yeah, it's huge stakes, because obviously it will look somewhat ridiculous if the government is effectively suing its own public inquiry that it set up, that it set the terms of reference for. They wouldn't do that unless there was something really, really big at stake. So that's why I think it is touch and go, but the options available to them.
OK, and on to Rishi, who's in Moldova. What's on the agenda for that?
Well, he's got the European Security Summit, where he is, again, pushing his line of trying to get international cooperation on small boats. His strategy thus far on small boats has been to, on the one hand, try and introduce tough new legislation that we can control at home, but also trying to strike deals with other countries to make the process of repatriation easier, and ultimately to cut off the supply of illegal migrants coming in the boats in the first place.
So we have just had some house figures out, a 0.1% fall. Literally just came out in the past few seconds. That is breaking news. I mean, this comes as we're talking about Tory donors essentially blocking any more of their donations to the government in defiance, really, about the lack of house building in this country. Very interesting times, isn't it?
This is a massive problem for the government. We have not been building enough homes in this country for many, many years. The latest government policies have slowed this down. There is huge frustration in the development industry, because these are the people that build the homes. And if we're going to withstand the numbers of immigration that we have, if we're going to give young people a chance on the kind of first ladder of life, we've got to increase the housing supply. And this will only get more of a problem for the government unless they open up and liberalise.
And Alex, just before we let you go, have you ever barbecued, or are you one of these half of the population that's never
I don't believe
hosted a
that
barbecue?
figure. I don't believe that figure. That does not sound right to me. I'm a classic Englishman. I will barbecue in any weather. The colder the better. The more overcooked the better. It's a rite of passage.
Absolutely.
Oh, I think it was an Australian that wrote that report. Maybe.
Alex, really good to see you. Thank you
very
so
much.
Now, ITV has instructed a barrister to investigate the circumstances of Philip Schofield's departure from this morning.
The external review is expected to take months and could see Schofield grilled about his affair with a much younger colleague.
Well, last night, Kerry Katona spoke to Dan Wootton about her frustration that Schofield was protected by ITV. Let's take a listen.
And I also want to talk about the likes of Caroline Flack on ITV2 on Love Island. She had an argument with her boyfriend and they asked her to step down like that. I get really angry and really annoyed, and I don't understand why Philip was still sat on that sofa for 3 years and ITV knew about it and Caroline took her own life. That really gets to me, and that needs to be really shouted about and voiced, because I don't understand that. And then I think the audacity, being condescending, belittling to people with real issues on the sofa. Who are they to give him the right for an opinion and tell them what's right or wrong?
Well, in a statement, the chief executive of ITV, Dame Carolyn McCall, said, "I want to reassure you that as a producer and broadcaster, ITV takes its responsibilities around duty of care and speaking up seriously, and has robust and well-established processes in place which allow anyone who works with us to raise concerns that they may have anonymously."
Well, we're now joined by national reporter Theo Chikomba, who joins us live from the television centre in West London, where this morning is filmed. And Theo, ITV executives are set to face the music, right?
Good morning to you both. Yes, they are indeed. Next week on Tuesday, ITV's bosses, including Dame Carolyn McCall, will be meeting the Department for Digital, Sport and Media as well. And they'll be looking into some of the things what have happened over the last few weeks. And this external review, which has also been commissioned by ITV, will look further into the details as well. So over the next few months, perhaps we'll hear further details. But in this letter, which we have seen released last night by Dame Carolyn McCall. It says this gives Philip permission of the extent of his deception. The work will extend to cover any related issues that may emerge. This work will be carried out as quickly as possible and will be happy to share the outcome. And also in this letter, she referred to some of the support that's been offered to the young man who Philip has admitted he was having an affair with. But they have said, considering the reaction to the story and what's been going around on social media in particular, they are now offering that young man support. But of course, this leaves more questions. Who knew what and when, and what kind of support was in place over the last few weeks? And we do understand Holly will be returning to the sofa next week on Monday. There, of course, have been questions this week about whether she will continue in her role as she has done since 2009. But for the next few weeks, of course, the story continues to rumble and further details will be revealed as well.
OK, Theo Chicomba at Television Centre in West London, thank you very, very much. Thank you. Now, house prices fell by 0.1% in May, following a 0.4% increase in April. That's according to figures released this hour by Nationwide, with the average house price sitting at £260,736.
Right, let's cross now to Ben Beadle from the Residential Landlords Association. So what does this mean for house hunters and sellers?
Morning, folks. Well, it means it's still a little bit of a tricky time. I think the one thing I'm at pains to suggest is we shouldn't get too excited over the course of a month's worth of figures. But what this is against the backdrop of is a continuing trend. We had an uptick last month, but we had 7 consecutive months of negative figures. And I think it just goes to show that there is still a little bit of turmoil in the market, and that's underpinned by very, very high interest rates. Certainly the era of cheap debt is well over.
So obviously there's insufficient houses, so, you know, it's really, really difficult for people to buy, you know, first-time buyers as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right, Peter. And I think the other issue that we see in the housing sector is also what's going on in the private rented sector as well. Not only are we seeing not enough homes being built, and those homes experiencing turmoil with increased mortgage costs, we're seeing people in the private rented sector, because there aren't enough homes there, then they're paying more rent, rents are increasing, and we're seeing a perfect storm of people paying more in the PRS, not able to move to their homes, and not enough incentives to turn generation rent into generation buy. And I think the other conundrum here is that yesterday Zoopla had a report out showing that 11% of listings were those from landlords that were selling up. And that's also causing a huge crisis of confidence as we simply don't have enough homes of any tenure at the moment.
And Ben, it comes as the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is facing pressure to bring back Help to Buy. It's all in this plan to help to woo younger voters, because it is a popular policy, isn't it, for getting young people on the housing ladder.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. And certainly the Conservatives do need to have an offer for that kind of voter. I guess the concern that the sector has is that it doesn't always encourage homes to be built in the right sort of place. And it can have a tendency to inflate the market. I think what we would rather see is a much more holistic approach to housing, where we have incentives to increase supply in the private rented sector by reversing some tax changes, but also having some incentives for first-time buyers to be able to overcome some really tricky challenges around very, very high mortgage interest rates at the moment. That's if they can get them at all.
Well, thanks for the chat, Ben Beadle.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Really good to see you this morning. Thank you. Right, the time is 18 minutes past 7. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
Police have launched an investigation into the deaths of 2 people following an incident in the water in Bournemouth yesterday. Emergency services attended the scene and 10 people were recovered from the water. A 17-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl sustained critical injuries. They both later died in hospital.
More than 1 million NHS staff in England are set to receive increased salaries and one-off payments from today as part of the latest pay deal. Nurses, paramedics and midwives are among those who will receive a 5% pay rise, backdated to April.
Glasgow has become the first Scottish city to enforce a low-emission zone, meaning all vehicles entering the city centre must now be compliant with emission standards or face a fine. Glasgow City Council said the policy will protect public health by tackling unacceptably high levels of air pollution, but opposition parties say it will affect livelihoods and businesses.
We've got you all talking about barbecues this morning, haven't we? Half of British people haven't ever hosted a barbecue, which we just think is bonkers, don't we? Well, you certainly do, because we've got a Greek and an Aussie in the room.
I mean, I do, but then again, what does my opinion really matter in this? Because it's just because I love them, it doesn't mean someone else is going to love them. And I can see that by what Nicole says here. She goes, sorry, Peter, but I hate barbecues. Oh, fair enough. She said, I've been to one, I've never done one myself and don't intend to. I do love meat, though. I just can't explain why I dislike them. I mean, look, not everyone's going to like everything, right?
But it's in your blood, isn't it?
Well, yes.
It certainly is. Lots of you getting in touch with your favourite sorts of recipes to do on the barbecue. Elle agrees with me. I said earlier that I really like bananas on a barbecue because it makes them go all lovely and caramelised. And I like to have it with ice cream as well because then you get the hot and cold
That is
combo.
really interesting. I know you can do it with plantain, but I've never...
Well, if you take anything from me, Peter, take bananas on a barbecue with you. Take it home. Let me know what you think.
That.
But she agrees with me and she says add a splash of liqueur and fresh cream, sprinkle of cinnamon. Sounds like perfection.
I'm getting hungry. Timothy says teriyaki chicken or a beef tri-tip.
Tri-tip.
Along with some corn. New word I've learned today.
Yeah. Bob says he's never been to a barbecue in his life, but he loves us together and we're great, by the way. That's very nice of you to say, Bob.
Well,
Thank
come
you
and have
very
a
much.
barbecue with us then. We can discuss it.
Nicola says she was invited to a barbecue whilst living in Texas. It was perfect weather, huge surprise, and everyone ate indoors as it was a takeaway barbecue meal. Yeah, indoor barbecues are quite fun, to be fair. You have to get used to those as a Brit.
I like this one. Alex says, last time I barbecued was in 1995, and he has a good reason for this, because when me and my wife had our first barbecue in our own home, and one of the neighbours moaned so much about their washing being affected, and we decided we'd never bother again. And that is obviously a problem. I mean, it's a nice smell when you're smelling it. Not so great when it goes all over your clothes.
Yeah, not great on your clothes and not good in your hair. If you're sat at a barbecue, you will smell that you've been sat at a barbecue for a really long time. And just very briefly, we've been talking about TikTok and disciplining children. Is TikTok encouraging children to misbehave? Andy says once corporal punishment and smacking your children was banned, discipline in schools went downhill. Kids are like dogs. If you don't train them properly, they will bite you. Interesting. Do keep your views coming in on that one. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Right, stay with us. We'll ask if it's right for kids to take up summer jobs to build character and life experience, or if they should be allowed to enjoy their time off. That's next. I was too involved in that thought
Lots
process.
of views.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. The time is 7:26. Still lots to come on today's programme. Now, if you're ever up at this time in the morning, then there's a good chance that you've made yourself a coffee, but that could soon be a thing of the past. Panic stations. At 7:45, we'll investigate the threat of coffee extinction.
And at 8:20, we'll take a look at the newly announced England squad for the Women's World Cup, as some high-profile names are left off the list.
And you can join in any of our discussions this morning by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com. And we think you're going to enjoy this next segment. It's certainly going to get you talking.
It's half-term for school students around the country, and don't we know it? And there's not long to go until their summer holidays.
But should parents encourage their teenagers to get a summer job and experience life in the workplace? Or should we let them enjoy being kids, enjoy their freedom during the school holidays?
Broadcaster Claire Muldoon believes kids should have summer jobs in order to build character.
Meanwhile, journalist Julie Cook thinks that we shouldn't force children into part-time work and instead we should let them stay young. Well, good morning to you both. Really good to see you. I'm looking forward to this one. Julie, let's start with you. So why do you not think that we should force teenagers to get part-time jobs?
I come from the school of Dickensian workhouse poor child. So I was working from 13. I did a paper round, then I was waitressing, then I was glass collecting, then I worked in a supermarket. So I worked from 13, cleaning out budgies, that was another one. And so when I had my own children, I didn't want that for them because I found that my summers and evenings and weekends and things were very much spent worrying about work, worrying about money. And if I wanted the money to see my friends, I had to earn it, so that was my situation. Now I've had my own children who are 14 and 9. I don't want them to have that same situation I had. I don't want them to be worrying about, have I got £10 to get the bus and go and buy this and that and the other. I want them to be kids while they're young and worry about money when they're slightly older.
OK, interesting. Claire, what do you make of that?
Well, whilst I sympathise with what Julie has just said in terms of what she had to do, I certainly think you're here now being a very successful journalist, and you're here on Breakfast TV. So it hasn't done you that much harm. And it has, in fact, I would say, instilled a discipline in you, and it's actually enabled you to become more communicative in your later life and indeed your life at the time. Everyone knows I've got 4 kids. My youngest is 19, my eldest is 25. Now, I didn't say I had them down a pit at age 11, but they did start to work. They babysat at 16, 15, 16. They babysat for local neighbours. Again, it was fostering an environment of community. They earned it was cash, you know, it was great. They could then go to Starbucks to get their coffees or whatever it was they wanted to do. They've all got mobile phones now, and I take umbrage with the fact that they can get lost. If you lose your phone, go and Google minimum wage, go and work out how long it will take you to actually earn to get that phone bill paid. It's learning through results, it's learning through discipline, it's learning through hard work. And where is the problem in that? You know, it fosters so much more than just getting them out of their beds and getting them in. And I think it's a very self-righteous thing to say, oh, but I want my child to enjoy their childhood. They will enjoy their childhood. I'm not talking about getting them working at age 11 or 12. Paper rounds, I don't think we have them anymore because print is going out of fashion. Milk rounds, it's electric vehicles now that deliver milk if you get your milk delivered. It's different, completely different. But I would say there are still jobs out there that need people, that need feet on the ground. And 50% of the British public not having a barbecue. Get the 16-year-olds in there to foster it up and cook and do it. And clean up afterwards.
I mean, it's such an interesting point because both points make sense. So I grew up, 11 was my first job. I was actually a toilet attendant. Yeah, I did. I had to collect money as people went in, and I would get 50 cents on a Saturday, Australian money, 50 cents on a Sunday. I'd get $1 for the weekend, and that would be enough for my cheeseburger at McDonald's.
Yes.
And I would walk 20 minutes to get this cheeseburger. Now, here's the thing. Then I went into stocking shelves in supermarkets and so on and so on. So that did me good, yes. But why then am I, as a parent, I just can't push my children to do the same. I try and push the work ethic on them, but not necessarily pushing them to do jobs, because I have this similar thing of like, I'm being a bit soft, and I know
you are.
And my dad's telling me I'm being, and you're telling me.
Yes. And everyone listens to Claire Muldoon because there's no doom and gloom.
I would listen to Claire Muldoon. I'm a bit scared of Claire Muldoon.
Don't say you're scared.
In a nice,
but what I don't get the problem with kids learning to communicate with society. You know, there's so many people coming on public transport, and I always say good morning, thank you very much to the bus driver. You know, and my kids, when I come off the bus, they used to be mortified. I would always shout, thank you. That is a skill. It's communication. It's a skill. It's society. Instead of having them locked up on lockdown, wearing masks, not being able to communicate, the only form of communication some kids actually had during the pandemic and post-pandemic is gaming. You know, that's not real life.
But I think you can still instill those values of being polite and able to speak and communicate without pushing them to necessarily get a job. I mean, also, I really agree with your point, despite this being a debate, I agree with your point that there aren't the jobs that used to be out there. For example, you used to be able to, I don't know, look after your next-door neighbour's cat or...
You still can.
Yeah, but now there's professional cat sitters, there's professional dog sitters. All the things that children used to do have been sort of professionalised. I used to have friends who did glass collecting in pubs. No one goes to pubs anymore, so there's those jobs.
Well, they do. The pubs are starting to open up.
Well, they don't exist on the same scale, I don't think, but there's not as many jobs for kids.
I mean, Julie, there's something in this, because there's a point Claire is making is great. So I heard someone say that when we were growing up and we would see the prize at the top of the mountain, our parents would go, you better start climbing. And when you'd fall, they'd be like, well, if you don't get up there, you're not going to do it. Eventually, you'd climb this mountain, however hard it was, and you'd grab the prize. And what this person said was now the kids see the mountain... the kids see the prize, but they don't see the mountain. And this has become a problem.
It has.
Where they think they can just get it.
Oh, they've got a free pass up that mountain now, haven't they?
Yeah.
They have. Everyone's facilitating, you know, young people. Young people can go, like, straight from school to university if they go that path, to tertiary education, or then they go into full-time employment. The employers are like, you know, you need to do this, do that. You can't speak to me like that. Well, I'm sorry, I pay your wage, I can. You know, where are the days when people used to quake in their boots they were going to get an appraisal? Now employers can't say anything to their employees for fear that they will upset them, or they feel...
Well, I think I'm quite with Julie on this, because I've always worked very, very hard. Since the age of 15, I've always been in jobs. And I do feel like, looking back on it now, it's great. It's instilled really good skills in me. I totally agree with you in that, in terms of communication and coming to work. It wasn't a huge shock to the system because I've always worked. But at the same time, I do look back, especially at my university days, and think I could have enjoyed myself a lot more if I wasn't in a cafe 3 days a week alongside full-time studies. And when I come home from holidays, I work in a restaurant at home in Essex.
Yeah, but you still had your holidays.
Yeah, I'd had my uni holidays, but I used that working as well.
Yeah, but you still went away, I'm sure, with your mates. Did you go interrailing? Did you go...
Yeah, I did interrailing.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I just...
So don't sit there, Ellie, and say, oh, poor me, woe me.
No, I'm just saying...
You know, I didn't have anything.
I can see why Julie, having worked really, really hard, why she would want perhaps different for your children, because it is tough. I wanted to ask you about Claire's point there about skills that you have in the workplace. So, you know, understanding hierarchy, time management, teamwork, communicate, all of those things that you need to thrive in the workplace. How do you hope that can be instilled in your children if they're not having part-time jobs and getting exposed to those sorts of things?
I think you can still instil that in them by having conversations and by, as Claire said, rightly, respecting people who serve you, respecting the waitress who brings your... You know, we went out yesterday with some friends and there was a waiter who looked about 17, and I made sure in front of my children, I said, thank you very much. Oh, you must be working really hard today. Giving feedback and being grateful to people who are serving you, or whatever age they are. I think you can still instil those virtues without your child having to go to work. At 18, yes, send them to work. You know, get a job when you're at university or whatever. I just don't think under 18 is the time to do that. I think you should enjoy being young.
What about if there was a compromise and they, you know, because they have to go to school all day, come home, do all their homework. You know, what about if they just concentrated on the school hours of being at school and were kids when they came home and didn't have to do the homework and then got a job?
Yep, scrap the homework. That's what I say. I've always said that. I don't think it's an ideal situation for any family. All it does is actually cause fights in the house normally. Domestic bliss goes through the window after school time. It really does. Scrap the homework, let them be kids from whenever they come home to that. Get them out on a Saturday, get them working. You know, Sunday you can open now, you can work. I don't see what the problem is. I can only see the benefits. And I'm sure you at home do too.
Yeah, it's a good debate. Claire, Julie, really enjoyed having you both in the studio. Always fantastic to see you. Thank you very much.
Very welcome. Very much. Stay with us. We'll discuss an incredible new tablet, the first of its kind on the NHS, which could head off migraines for good. Freddie Gray and Nikki Hodgson going through the papers with us next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, welcome back. The time is 7:39 and joining us now to go through inside today's papers is Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and author Nikki Hodgson. Really good to see you both this morning. Nikki, let's start with you, shall we? And this is a story in The Guardian about the university funding model being broken. This is a warning in the papers today.
Yes, it is. So obviously last week we had those migration figures published and there was lots of discussion about how we get the migration figures down, or that's what the Tories want to achieve. But people on the other side of it were sort of saying, if we cap the amount of foreign students who make up the vast proportion at the minute of our migrants and the people that they bring in with them, their families, how on earth are we going to afford to go to university if we are British? Because we rely on foreign students to keep the prices down for British students. And at the minute, tuition fees are capped at £9,000 a year, which is still a lot of money and makes it very expensive to go to university. And if we cut the number of foreign students down that are actually effectively subsidising our education, those fees are only going to go up. So what do we do? It's the vice-chancellors of universities who are warning us this morning that, you know, the university model is broken. The minute you start tackling the number of foreign students, you're in an absolute pickle. And, you know, I feel so much for students right now. You know, I mean, it's a long time since I was at university and I had to pay that. I'm still paying off my student loan, which is what I always tell people because it can take a very long time sometimes. But, you know, I've got a little baby daughter and I'm already thinking, how on earth are we going to be able to afford for her to go to university? Because we are moving towards the American system, it seems. You know, we're looking at £50,000, £100,000 fees if we decide to stop taking foreign students at the number we are.
I mean, it's a terrifying thought, isn't it? I mean, but that will be the answer. It will be our own tuition fees that will increase.
Well, Nikki's exactly right about the American model. I mean, I've worked in America and students take on an enormous amount of debt on the understanding that they're going to earn more money because they're taking on that debt, because they're getting that degree. I don't know if a lot of British degrees are necessarily going to get you the same rewards because the way the British economy is set up is different. So, you know, a lot of degrees are just either going to be dropped or they're going to become very, very expensive. I don't think we ever really thought about this. I mean, I was a student when tuition fees were first introduced. I went to Scotland and the Scots didn't have to pay it, but we did. So we felt very bitter about that. But, I mean, you know, it was obviously always going to creep up. The costs of an education are massive. So unless it's government funded, it is inaffordable.
But where's the money coming from, Freddie?
Where does money come from?
Magic money tree.
There's no magic money tree.
Yeah.
I think, you know, perhaps we have to get more realistic about higher education. Maybe higher education isn't right for a lot of people. I think a lot of people are doing degrees that are, you have a good time and it's great, and I don't want to not let young people have a good time, but there are too many people doing degrees that aren't actually useful.
Yeah.
But don't you think, what do you think about the issue of, foreign students effectively subsidising British students' education?
Well, it's a sticking plaster, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a quick fix. And, it's good that our universities are considered so prestigious, but actually that's declining. I think, China is now educating more of its people in higher education.
Yeah.
I think we need to think harder about our university system, and I think we need quite substantial reforms that will be quite painful for people, but it's got to be done.
Yeah. Freddie, let's stay with you, shall we? This is in the Telegraph. Boris Johnson has handed over all of his WhatsApps, so the ball is now very firmly in Rishi Sunak's court.
It's a brilliant, classic Boris Johnson move, which is he's got fed up of Rishi Sunak constantly briefing against him about his WhatsApp and about Partygate, which is the never-ending story. And so he's handed over his WhatsApp, and now the civil service and Number 10 are panicking because the pressure on them is to hand over their WhatsApps to the COVID inquiry. Nobody wants their WhatsApps to be a matter of public inquiry. I know I don't. But I think that, this is just going to bubble on and on and on. And it's the story behind the story here is there's a Boris Johnson camp in the Tory party and there's a Rishi Sunak camp, and they hate each other. And they're desperately trying to undermine each other in the press. Most people have forgotten about Partygate. I think lots of people were very angry about it at the time, and rightly so. But the real intrigue here is who's going to win in this knife fight between Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson.
The warring tribes. And do you think Rishi Sunak would be right to feel nervous having his WhatsApps given over to... Well, there's 40 names on that list.
Yeah.
There could be a lot to lose here for a lot of those.
I think everyone should be. Very important thing to remember that just because you delete a message on WhatsApp doesn't mean it's gone forever, and it can always be brought back from the dead.
What?
So everybody, even though it's encrypted, just never presume if you send a message on WhatsApp that it could be in the public domain at some point. And civil servants and politicos, they don't work like that. They don't think like that in the middle of the night when they're firing off messages about each other. They're not considering that fact. So if you kind of are thinking about it could all be published, and you've got nothing to worry about, but they don't. I think what will be difficult is who else is implicated as a result. That's why people are worried, not because Boris has said a load of stuff. Everyone that's kind of actually, as Freddie has rightly said, everybody is over Partygate. As much as we've talked about it, and I still think it's abhorrent, but people have moved on. But who else has said something troubling? Who else is still in government that is still kind of machinating in this way and causing trouble?
I'll tell you what I think Rishi Sunak's worried about, because he's let it be known. He did an interview with us at The Spectator about how he wanted to end lockdown earlier, and he was pushing against the government. I suspect he's worried his WhatsApps will say something rather different. Let me just float that out there.
Ooh, an exclusive there from you, Freddie. Some insight.
Nikki, back to you. The Times, the migraine tablet. This is incredibly interesting. My wife Emily suffers from migraines very bad.
Well, you'll absolutely know, Peter. If you've ever had migraines or lived with somebody that does, they are absolutely debilitating. They are so disturbing to your life, and they particularly affect women as well. It's more of a women's health issue because women are 3 times more likely to suffer from migraines. And migraines currently affect about 10 million people in the UK. So this is the invention of a pill that you take every day. It's just a tablet that dissolves under the tongue. And, effectively, it can just block you having migraines. If you have migraines at the minute, and I used to have them, you'll know that you feel one coming on, take some medication, hope it staves it off. Often it doesn't. And then you've got 3 days of just absolute illness, often being in a dark room, being sick. They are really, really debilitating. It isn't just a headache. So this is just a brilliant, brilliant story. It's a great breakthrough. And importantly for women's health as well, because we talk a lot about how women's health is underfunded and we don't take women's health as seriously. So obviously it does affect everyone, but it disproportionately affects women. So, just a very good news story today on that.
Well, there you go. Good news for Emily.
Excellent. Yeah.
Very
I
good.
like the idea that it melts on the tongue.
Do you like the sound of that?
A wafer tablet, Freddie. A bit Catholic there, isn't it?
Yeah. There we go.
I like the sound of that. Freddie, let's have a quick look over the pond, shall we, at Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump.
Ron v. Don.
Ron v. Don, very good.
That's coming up in American politics. It's not even coming up, it's happening already. The story is that Ron DeSantis is way behind in the polls against Donald Trump at the moment. And Trump's ace card, in a way, is that various other people are running. So you've got Tim Scott, you've got Nikki Haley, you've got Mike Pence, you've got others. And the more you can dilute Trump's opponents, the better chance he's got. So if you look at the polls, DeSantis is about 10 points behind Trump without opponents. He's about 20 points behind if you put other opponents in. So the sort of Stop Trump campaign in the Republican Party, they need to, I think, settle on DeSantis quite soon. They need to get other runners out the way and say, we're going to back DeSantis to beat Trump. I still think he'll lose because for all the hype around DeSantis, he's not actually a very good campaigner. He's not a very good public speaker. He's not very good with the public. And whatever you think of Donald Trump, he is a brilliant campaigner. I've been to lots of campaign rallies with Donald Trump. He has a certain magic with the crowd. Whether you find it despicable or not, it's undeniable.
So you think his chances are very high?
At the moment, I can't see how Donald Trump is stopped. But then you have to take into account that with Donald Trump, things blow up all the time. So something could come. But then we've been thinking that something's going to stop Donald Trump for about 8 years now, and it tends not to.
Well, the thing is, Stormy Daniels had to go. E. Jean Carroll did. Two people of whom I've worked with in my former life as a sex and porn correspondent, by the way. So it's quite funny that I know them both and they both tried to bring him down. And I'm personally wondering if there's somebody else in the pipeline that just hasn't come out yet.
OK, we've got to leave it there, I'm afraid. Really, really good to see you both, Nikki and Freddie, and we're going to be back in the next hour. Now, almost 3/4 of us enjoy a cup of coffee more than once a week. We have about 3 every morning, yeah.
Yes.
1 in 10 drinking up to 3 cups a day. Oh, that's us.
The beloved beverage is, absolutely, a mainstay in most offices and homes. And caffeine junkies take for granted that their next hit is guaranteed.
Yeah, thankfully. Well, however, reports found that 50% of the world's coffee-growing land could disappear by 2100, with limited coffee supply set to become a reality. Well, joining us now to discuss this is CEO of True Start Coffee, Helena Hills. Helena, this is a terrifying prospect. What would we do without coffee?
I know. Hi. I mean, the term extinction is being bandied around a little bit in the media. Coffee going extinct, which is terrifying for all of us. We all love coffee. And I would say that the term extinction is dramatic. That I guess it emphasises the scale of the challenges that coffee supply, the coffee industry is facing, because it's true that there are big changes that are taking place, and we need to be aware of them. We need to be proactive with them, because if we ignore them, you're right, the delicious coffee or several coffees that we enjoy might not be available in 50 years' time. And it's due to multiple reasons, really. Like, firstly, coffee plants they're delicate and they need specific conditions to grow. So they prefer stable temperatures, specific altitude ranges, a certain amount of rainfall, all that kind of thing. And changes in the climate are disrupting that specific set of conditions. So rising global temperatures, of course, unpredictable weather patterns. We're seeing more droughts, more floods. These are all impacting the areas where coffee can be grown. And there was a study last year from researchers in Switzerland that predict that the current rate of climate change will cut the most suitable existing coffee farming lands by more than 50%, as you said. But I actually saw it was by 2050, which isn't that far away. And there's another reason as well that coffee plants there's lots of reasons. Coffee plants are actually very vulnerable to a number of diseases and pests. There's one called coffee leaf rust, and that's a fungus that's been affecting coffee plantations all over the world. And with warming temperatures, that fungus can thrive in new regions where it couldn't survive before. And it's quite interesting because most of the coffee we actually drink comes from just 2 farmed species. So you might have heard of Arabica and also Robusta. So there's quite a narrow genetic pool, and these species are more susceptible to diseases and pests like coffee leaf rust. So it's important that we preserve and explore the diversity of other species that are currently wild,
I'm kind of happy and sad. I'm happy because I've been drinking coffee and it's given me a kick and I feel great, but I'm sad at the fact that that might not happen. If you're a coffee lover like me, right, so what can we do to save the beans? Is there certain buying habits that are more sustainable? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. As consumers, we play like a crucial role. We need to use for brands that prioritise sustainability and are actively working to reduce carbon emissions, promote fair pay, and invest in initiatives to benefit coffee farmers in their communities. So, for example, coffee farmers often struggle with low incomes. They need to be able to financially invest in their business. They need to be able to invest in new, more sustainable farming practices, for example. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm going quite a bit this side. Can you hear me all right?
But I'm getting the whole thing. It's got to do with coffee. I can hear everything.
Perfect. Yes, I was echoing. So we do need to support various, we support farmers and we support social and environmental projects.
Helena, you are right. Your audio is falling out a bit there. You are totally right. But we love your energy. You are so brilliant. So thank you so much for coming on and explaining that to us, because it is a terrifying prospect. Helena Hills, really good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
And apologies for those audio issues there.
Stay with us. We'll have more on Boris Johnson's challenge to the Prime Minister as the deadline to hand over pandemic WhatsApp approaches.
But first, here's your forecast with Alex Deakin.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a dull start for most of us, but I'm reasonably optimistic that for many, grey skies will turn blue through the day today. Thanks to this, a chunky area of high pressure which has been dominating our weather all week and will continue to control our weather into next week, keeping things mostly dry. Now, out there this morning, the cloud is thick enough in places for a little bit of light rain and drizzle, and the cloud has moved in across much of the country through the night, but West Wales, northwest Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland having a sunny start, and the cloud will retreat back to the east through the day. So the Midlands, southern parts of England, northwest England, southern Scotland, all brightening up, but this eastern coast may well stay pretty glum and pretty chilly with a breeze coming in from the sea. Elsewhere, further west, top temperatures getting into the low 20s once more, feeling pretty pleasant with fairly light winds. Now, through this evening and overnight, look what happens. The cloud comes back in overnight, back in across the Midlands, into southern Scotland, eventually into Wales and western parts of England as well. Clearer skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland may allow a bit of mist and fog. And it's here where we'll see the lowest temperatures getting down into single figures, well down in some rural spots. But most places across England and Wales start tomorrow at 9 or 10, just like this morning. We'll start with a lot of cloud as well. But again, that cloud should break up quite quickly, I fancy, tomorrow through the morning. And although some parts of the east coast may stay glum, much of eastern England looking a bit brighter on Friday. Better chance of seeing lengthier spells of sunshine as we go through the day. Again, there'll still be a breeze coming in from the sea, so even if we see more sunshine, it'll still be cooler in the east. Further west, that's where, again, we'll see temperatures over 20 degrees, although generally just a degree or so down on today's values. That high pressure isn't going anywhere. It sticks around through the weekend and beyond, so a lot more dry weather to come, even well into next week. Goodbye.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Boris Johnson piles pressure on the Prime Minister as he hands over his pandemic WhatsApps.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 1st of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with the lovely Ellie Costello and Peter Andre.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Rishi Sunak is facing a challenge from his predecessor Boris Johnson to hand over pandemic WhatsApps and diaries to the COVID inquiry. Ahead of a 4 p.m. deadline today, the former PM disclosed the material to the Cabinet Office.
ITV has instructed a barrister to investigate the circumstances around Philip Schofield's exit from This Morning. The external review is expected to take months and could see Schofield grilled about his affair with a much younger colleague.
The Prime Minister will use a meeting of European leaders in Moldova today to call for a joint response to illegal migration. He will also announce a new intelligence deal with Bulgaria, a key country for people smugglers entering Europe.
And are the kids all right? We'll investigate the crisis facing the younger generation in Britain and ask the experts what can be done to put children on the right path for the future.
Loads of you getting in touch with us this morning. We are inundated with your emails. Lots of people very, very happy to see Peter. Oh, here we go. This is the nice bit about you. Tony says, Peter Andre is a breath of fresh air. He's down to earth and he's one of us. Let's have him on our screens permanently. Jeff says, please make Peter permanent. Nice flow, very refreshing look. Billy says, nice to see Peter Andre on the show with Ellie. Hope he's asked again to be on the show. He's got the flow and he knows how to talk and hold a conversation. And Andrew says, it's great to hear you. I love that the presenters openly discuss real life and draw from their own experiences. Peter adds yet another dimension to this.
Well,
so lots of love for you,
very
Pete.
Kind. Thank you so much. Views on kids working. Bernard says, a nice middle-class attitude to not letting your kids work. They are going to grow up with no value of money and work ethics. I worked from age 11 and now run 9 companies. Wow.
Do you think it's a middle-class attitude if you don't let your kids work?
I think we've just become soft. I'm one of those soft.
But you hold your hands up to it, don't you?
Yeah, I do, yeah. John says, I had my son very late in life, 52, when he was born, and I spoiled him rotten. Anything he wanted, I bought him, even to his first car. Insurance cost $2,000 because he was only 17. Only now he is 22 and he started to grow up, but still comes to Pops for a loan. That's never paid back. I wish I'd listened to my wife, who really did have a hard upbringing in Nigeria. Very interesting, that. Yeah.
Colin says it was a brilliant debate on children working. Those who do it, who don't do it, will forever regret it. It's a really good experience for teenagers to learn the value of work and earning their own money. Well, do keep your views coming in.
Yeah,
loads of them coming in on, well, literally loads. There's some on barbecues as well. Apparently half of British people have never hosted a barbecue in their lives. But a good point to make, one of the views as mentioned, many people live in flats and high-rise apartments, don't have a garden. If you don't have a garden, you can't host a barbecue.
And it wasn't that got me. It was the 14% that have never been to a barbecue.
Yes, we're
That's
confused
the
by
one.
that.
We need to get you to a barbecue. We need to do some sort of barbecue for the country.
Pete's going to host.
I think there's more problems that we have to solve.
But you could bring us together and maybe then problems
yes.
will be solved. Do keep those views coming in.
Yeah.
gbviews@gbnews.com.
Why not?
Boris Johnson has put pressure on the PM to hand over WhatsApps and diaries to the pandemic inquiry after he gave the materials the Cabinet Office in full and unredacted form.
The government is on course for an unprecedented legal battle if it misses the 4 p.m. deadline to disclose the documents.
Well, let's speak now to our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. Tom, fascinating development here, because we were talking yesterday about that deadline, which is 4 p.m. today. The ball then was in Boris Johnson's court, now very firmly in Rishi Sunak's court.
Yes, this has been a rollercoaster of a story, and to some extent I think that some of the conversation around this story has been missed. There's been so much discussion in the papers and on broadcast about Boris Johnson not handing over papers, when actually it turns out the blockage wasn't Boris Johnson, it was the Cabinet Office. It was Oliver Dowden, the Secretary of State in the Cabinet Office, and the Deputy Prime Minister. He's the guy that's holding back these documents, and it seems now that Boris Johnson is only too happy to hand over the reams of WhatsApps and indeed private diaries that he was handwriting throughout the crisis. Now, perhaps that's because we've heard a lot of Boris Johnson's WhatsApps. A lot of them have been published already in the Daily Telegraph because, of course, his conversations with Matt Hancock made up so much of that COVID discussion. But also, of course, we know that some of these diary entries have made their way through the Cabinet Office and into the hands of the police as well. Some people around Boris Johnson very suspicious of what Oliver Dowden has been doing and his role in that. I think the prism through which we should look at this story is almost a disagreement between those around Boris Johnson and those around Oliver Dowden and, to a lesser extent, Rishi Sunak. Now, what the government are saying here is that they don't think it's appropriate that every single text that was ever sent during COVID should go to this inquiry. One of the examples that is raised is, what if a government minister had an ill child and personal details? Should that be going to the inquiry? But ultimately, what the inquiry says is that they should be making that decision, not the politicians.
And how likely do you think it's that the Cabinet Office will meet that 4 p.m. deadline? Because it's coming close.
It is coming close, and to be honest, nobody knows. This is one of those great tense moments in politics, because up until now they're holding firm. And what could happen if they do not reach that deadline, if the Cabinet Office do not hand over in full all of this documentation, they could launch a judicial review, and that would take this to the High Court. That could be a moment of fairly high drama, the government versus the inquiry.
I mean, there's so much at stake here, not only the unprecedented legal battle, but also reputations and ultimately careers.
Well, certainly. And I think one of the reasons why Boris Johnson is being very open about this is almost in the same way that Matt Hancock has been very open about it. He handed over all of his texts to this inquiry. Boris Johnson is now saying all of his texts and diaries can be at this inquiry. It's those who have left office, who are no longer in the cabinet, who seem to be more open about allowing this inquiry to go through all of their stuff, whereas those who are currently in power, those currently sitting around the cabinet table, seem to be less keen for their documents to go to this inquiry. Now, one notable exception, I believe, is Grant Shapps, the Energy Secretary, who has said that the inquiry can take whatever they want from him. I'm not sure how many COVID decisions he was actually involved in. Of course, he was Transport Secretary for a time, so perhaps he was making some of those decisions about red lists and amber lists and green lists and all the rest of the confusing malarkey of COVID that we went through as a country. But it does seem particularly that there is this blockage in the Cabinet Office, and that is causing consternation and potentially high drama this afternoon.
Just a quick one, though, just going back on something that you said. Surely, if the problem is that you shouldn't have to hand over all your WhatsApp messages when you're in a position of authority like that, why are they using WhatsApp, which they use for personal, as well? It just doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't they have a phone specifically or a way of communication?
Or email.
That's got nothing to do with their personal.
Well, they do, but obviously sometimes these conversations just flow from the way in which people work. So, cabinet ministers will have a private phone and a government phone, but sometimes they will just haphazardly use their government phone for private business as well. One of the big concerns, however, that some privacy campaigners have been pointing to around this issue is that if we remember back to the Blair government, when something called the Freedom of Information Act was introduced, that meant that anyone could request seeing some of these private communications within government, notes that had been written, all the rest of it. What some campaigners have said is, as a result of that act, the number of things that have been written down in government has dramatically decreased. People more wanting to have conversations in person and not wanting to have a written record. And that is somewhat worrying for the historical record. The way in which people communicate in government has shifted over the last 20 years to have less stuff written down. And one of the worries about if everything just goes to this inquiry might future governments be less wanting to write things down, and we lose some of that record and some of that ability to have government functioning in the way that we might want.
Yeah, and there's that concern, isn't there, about the precedent of open communication, speaking freely, especially in times of national crisis. It's really interesting. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you.
Now, ITV has instructed a barrister to investigate the circumstances of Philip Schofield's departure from this morning.
The external review is expected to take months and could see Schofield grilled about his affair with a much younger colleague.
Last night, Kerry Katona spoke to Dan Wootton about her frustration that Philip Schofield was protected by ITV. Let's take a listen.
And I also want to talk about the likes of Caroline Flack on ITV2 on Love Island. She had an argument with her boyfriend and they asked her to step down like that. I get really angry and really annoyed, and I don't understand why Philip was still sat on that sofa for 3 years and ITV knew about it and Caroline took her own life. That really gets to me, and that needs to be really shouted about and voiced, because I don't understand that. And then I think the audacity, being condescending, belittling to people with real issues on the sofa. Who are they to give him the right for an opinion and tell them what's right or wrong?
Well, in a statement, the chief executive of ITV, Dame Carolyn McCall, said, "I want to reassure you that as a producer and broadcaster, ITV takes its responsibilities around duty of care and speaking up seriously and has robust and well-established processes in place which allow anyone who works with us to raise concerns that they may have anonymously."
OK, we're now joined by our national reporter, Theo Chikamba, who joins us live from the Television Centre in West London, where this morning is filmed. And Theo, the show goes on this morning, but it's the bosses preparing to be questioned that is the big story, right?
It is indeed. Many people were saying before this week, is the show going to continue in the same way it has done? And it has done this week in particular. But of course, that letter by Dame Carolyn McCall yesterday spelled out some of the details and also what's going to be happening in the next few days and weeks. We do understand ITV has commissioned an external review in terms of how this situation has been dealt with. So more details will come out, particularly some of those things we haven't heard at the moment. But in this statement, which she wrote and addressed to the Secretary of State, she said this: given the ongoing rumours, we continue to ask questions of both parties who continued to deny the rumours, including recently as this month. And she went on to say a lot of inaccuracy in some of what's been said. So perhaps this external review will highlight some of those things which have been out in the public over the last few days. And next week there'll be a meeting where ITV bosses, including Dame Carolyn McCall, will be meeting MPs on the Digital Culture and Media and Sport Committee, and they'll be looking into the laws governing public broadcasting, and no doubt what's been happening at ITV as well. There will be some questions about what this means for the company's reputation going forward, particularly how they've handled this. So we'll be looking out for that over the next couple of days and weeks, as well as no doubt this story will be continuing.
Theo Chikomba, thank you very much. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Well, let's speak now to entertainment journalist Caroline Frost. Good morning to you, Caroline. What did you make of what Kerry Katona was saying there, talking out about toxic culture at This Morning, saying that she was treated very unfairly by Philip Schofield in an interview with him, because it follows very, very closely, doesn't it, from similar accusations of this toxic culture from our very own Eamonn Holmes and also Dr. Ranj Singh.
Yeah, so this is just the latest in what is becoming quite a dramatic pile-on in terms of both Philip Schofield's behaviour personally and ITV as a whole. From on the guest side of things, we heard from Kerry Katona yesterday. We'd previously heard from Kim Woodburn that she didn't have a fun time being on the show. And then from behind the scenes, we've heard from Eamonn Holmes and also Dr. Singh at the weekend. I guess, poor old Alison Hammond and Dermot O'Leary ploughing on with their tireless guest, Giles Brandreth, quick to say this is a happy place and I love coming here. So at the moment, we have 4-1 in the point scoring of for and against. It's not looking good. I think they could probably do with a few fans and supporters at the moment, not just Giles.
Yeah, it's going to be 4-2 actually, because I have to say that when I've been there over the years, they've always been incredibly nice to me. The staff, the people on the floor, the execs, they've always been nice to me, and it's really hard, to
everyone's nice to you, Peter.
That's what I said.
No, it is hard to hear this because you almost don't want it to be true, you know what I mean? And I know that there's a lot of speculation still and there's no definites on anything, but it really is a difficult thing to hear when you've loved that family for so long, and I still love them, Yeah.
Well, it's nice to hear that you've had such a good time, and it's a healthy and, we should say, lucrative brand for ITV. It's the flagship of the daytime schedule. It is the programme around all the others are hung around it. So they will be doing everything they can to secure it going forward. The questions will be who will be on this ship as it continues to sail down the river. The case of who they need to sail that ship. Will it be Holly? Will it be the editor Martin? Or do they need to jettison some high-profile figures to show commitment to change, which is clearly what is going to be expected and required of them in the days and weeks ahead?
Absolutely, and we can't forget that people who have had bad experiences there have a right to speak and have a right to say what they've experienced. So it's getting deeper and deeper, this ITV issue.
It certainly is. Yeah. Do you think that we will see Holly Willoughby back on Monday? Because the papers are reporting that she is defiant, she plans to be back. But the more and more we hear about people speaking out against the culture of This Morning, it seems to be very damaging to not only This Morning, but also to Holly Willoughby's brand.
Well, I think this was what was behind their split, not just months, but perhaps years ago now, is that she began to realise she started out very much under Philip Schofield's protection and guidance back in 2007. She's grown as a presenter, as a brand, as a figure in the national consciousness. She doesn't need him anymore. And she has said she wants to continue to be with the show. She has other big campaigns to her name. She is a one-woman sort of juggernaut these days. I guess, where are we now? We're Thursday. It's we're learning about this story that it changes very quickly. So I'm not going to commit to yes or no. I'm going to say, let's see what the weekend brings. At the moment, she's on that sofa on Monday. Let's see what the next couple of days have in store, and then we'll know for sure what we'll expect to see, or whether it will be more fixed grins from Dermot and Alison come Monday morning.
OK, Caroline, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed on the latest in the Schofield saga. And Caroline makes a really good point, doesn't she, about Alison and Dermot? I mean, they are literally there every day with a smile on their face, just having to pretend like this isn't happening.
And let me tell you, those guys, both Dermot and Alison, have always been so sweet. They've never changed. They've just stayed the same all the way before when they were doing little, and now that they're doing loads and they're holding the ship, they're doing great.
They really, really are. So I think that's a really important thing to say. There are people there, as you said earlier, behind the scenes and on front, who are working really, really hard throughout all of this.
Absolutely. Right. NHS staff in South London are going on a 24-hour strike in an ongoing dispute over pay.
Well, the strike comes after Unite members rejected the government's pay offer, with the union arguing the 5% pay increase offered lags far behind inflation.
Our reporter, Lisa Hartle, is at St Thomas Hospital this morning. And Lisa, we know NHS staff in England receive a 5% increased salary today. So what are today's strikers looking for?
Well, I'm joined by a guest who can tell us all about it. It's Onay from Unite, the lead national of Unite. Thank you so much for joining us. So 24-hour strike started 7 a.m. today. What is it that your members are striking for?
Well, ultimately, our members are striking to save the NHS. All of the trade unions at the start of this campaign said this isn't just about pay. Pay is inextricably linked to the issue around vacancies and the crisis in the NHS. So that's why our members are taking action today. The pay proposals that have now been imposed by the government are nowhere near enough. They don't deal with the recruitment and retention crisis within the NHS, and unless we deal with that, then we're not going to deal with the crisis, and that's why our members are taking action again today.
And tell me who it is that's taking part, because there's so many different departments taking part in the strike today.
Well, our members work across the NHS, so as well as paramedics and nurses and doctors, we've also got security guards, we've got people working in pharmacy, we've got receptionists, so people join us from across the NHS. And I think it's worth saying as well that we have had a spike in recruitment since the action, especially here at St Thomas's, where more and more people are joining Unite, specifically because we are continuing to take action on the issue of the NHS.
And how hopeful are you that your members will get what you're asking for?
Well, this is a big thing that we're fighting for. We want fair pay for all NHS workers, and we are hopeful. That's why we're out today. And as a trade union, we do know how to win disputes. We've been involved in over 600 over the last 15 to 16 months. We've won 80% of those, putting an extra 350 million in extra earnings into our members' pockets. So we know how to win disputes. But the prize here is big. It's not just about pay. That is linked to the crisis in the NHS. And that's what the government pay proposals fail to deal with. And where is the workforce plan from the government?
Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and I'll let you join your colleagues again, and I'm sure we'll catch up with you and your colleagues later on. Thank you. So this strike will continue until 7 a.m. tomorrow, and then tomorrow there is also a strike planned by Yorkshire Ambulance Service.
OK, Lisa Hartle, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very, very much. And it is really important to cover that, because there is that 5.5% pay increase, but there are still people on the picket line saying that's just not enough.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the fact that a lot of medical staff go to other countries where, you know, the pay is more favourable, like Australia, for example.
Australia.
But there's the ethical dilemma, and that's the thing. Patients miss out on care, so it's just trying to find this balance. At least the 5.5% is definitely a great start.
It's a good start, yeah. But as you were saying earlier, we were having a discussion in the newsroom. In Australia, they earn, what, 3 times as much?
It ends up being, with the exchange rate, nearly 3 times the amount. Wow. Yeah. But
And then you worry about the brain drain in this country, don't you? You worry about doctors and nurses going elsewhere where they can earn a lot more money. Let us know what you think at home. gbnews@gbnews.com.
Yeah.
Now, the time is 21 minutes past 8. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
Police have launched an investigation into the deaths of 2 people following an incident in the water in Bournemouth yesterday. Emergency services attended the scene and 10 people were recovered from the water. A 17-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl sustained critical injuries. They both later died in hospital.
The average house price fell by over £1,000 in April after 3 months of increases. That's according to Halifax, which says the typical property value fell by 0.3% month on month. That takes the average UK house price to £286,000 in April.
Glasgow has become the first Scottish city to enforce a low-emission zone, meaning all vehicles entering the city centre must now be compliant with the emission standards or face a fine. Glasgow City Council said the policy will protect public health by tackling unacceptably high levels of air pollution, but opposition parties say the policy will affect livelihoods and businesses. Coming up, we'll bring you analysis of England's squad for the Women's World Cup as Beth Mead is left out due to injury. Paul Coit has everything you need to know. Next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts
Moss?
of women. Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The time is 8:27. Still lots to come on today's programme. As social media menace Mizzy gets into trouble again at 8:45, we're going to be asking, how do you keep your kids on the straight and narrow in the age of TikTok? And you're going to have a view on that one, aren't you?
Yeah. And as the country prepares for a heatwave, many of us will be firing up the grill, including me. Just after 9, we'll find out how to put the perfect barbecue on.
And remember, you can join in any of our discussions this morning by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com. We do love to hear from you. Well, it's time to go through all of the latest sports news now with broadcaster and our friend Paul Coit. Good morning to you, Paul.
I've got to say, Pete, that mysterious grill. Did they only? They're only doing a grilling. You know, they're only doing it so they can put mysterious grills.
It is. I get royalties. It's a win-win for me.
Is that right?
I get
so you're not upset about that? Cause
no, this is brilliant. Food and music. I mean, this is great.
Okay.
He's a good sport. He is. He's very, very good.
But not good at sport, as
now,
you can
that's
see.
not true. That's not true, because I know you know what we're talking about.
Yes, I know what you're talking about. I just can't do it.
Yeah, I know. But that's it. It's those who can't do teach, you know? Have you ever thought of teaching sport? Maybe that's the answer then. No.
But we can talk to you about it. We can do that.
Yes,
you're the teacher.
Okay, fine.
The World Cup squad, the women's one.
Yes, so it was announced yesterday. 23-player squad. World Cup is 49 days away now. Wow. So it was all about one person, Beth Mead.
Yeah.
This is what we were talking about yesterday. So Beth Mead, fantastic player, but she's had this ACL that goes back quite a few months. And would she be fit for the World Cup? She's actually ahead of schedule to get fit, but the answer was Serena Wiegmann decided no.
Oh.
So she's not going. So she's not going to go. And I think the player herself would probably agree as well. It's really unfortunate, but there's no Leah Williamson, the captain from the Euros, no Frank Kirby, Steph Houghton, legend, though she hasn't made it. But we still have great players.
I was about to say, those are all the big names.
Yeah.
Those are the names I'd know.
Yeah, they are names, but you still know Millie Bright, who's going to be the captain this time. Lucy Bronze. Now, there's also there's other names, and also we should mention Beth England. Now, Beth England and also Jordan Nobbs as well, two players. What they decided to do, because they weren't getting into the first team of playing for Chelsea and also playing for Arsenal, decided that it might be best for them to move, because then they can get first team football and they're more likely that they're going to get in the England side. So Beth England moved to Tottenham, 12 games, 12 goals. So she's in, and the same with Jordan Nobbs as well, as moved to Aston Villa. So they were gambles, but both paid off.
So do you think we're going to do well now you've seen the squad?
Oh, yeah, I hate tempting fate, but yes, we could all. No, I can't say. It's going to be tricky. It would have been tricky even without the injuries, but you know, we're going to give it a good go, and I think, you know, semi-finals. It's possible, of course, it's possible, because of the European champions. So let's hope so. 49 days to go down in Australia and New Zealand.
Should we stick with the theme of football and talk Roma, because Jose Mourinho is their manager. Yes. How did he take that loss?
He didn't take it very well, as you might imagine. It went to penalties. Sevilla beat Roma. So Roma, he's the Roma manager. He's won every European final that he's been in. Sevilla, they've won the Europa League now for the 7th time. I mean, it's ridiculous how they could keep winning this, but they've managed to, so prevented Jose Mourinho. Now, Jose was not happy with the refereeing, Anthony Taylor, English referee, so he's very unhappy, hates losing, so he picked up his silver medal. I mean, this is a runners-up medal for the manager. Went over to the crowd, gave it away, didn't want it. So when there's a kid, you know, you get kids in the crowd saying, you know, please, can I have your shirt? Which would probably happen to your gigs, Pete, isn't it, most of the time? You know, that's the sort of thing.
Not anymore, my friends. No, those days are a little bit gone.
I do not believe that for a second.
But it was nice while it lasted.
But Jose Mourinho, I don't know whether they'd say to a manager, please, can I have your sports jacket? But he gave there's a kid there, and he ended up going, I don't want this. And he's saying, silver medals, no good to me. I don't like losing. So he gave the medal away. Wow. And then in the car park afterwards, starts shouting at Anthony Taylor, who was in there, and shouting obscenities at him. He hates losing, so he was not happy and did not take the loss well. So there you go. That's
Diva.
OK, tennis. Victory for Cam Norrie.
Yeah, Cam Norrie. See, there's a little controversy here. So he beat Frenchman Luca Pouille in straight sets. He's been booed as well by the French fans. Has Cam. It's probably because he's beaten 2 Frenchmen now. But there was an interesting moment in the game where, obviously, you know, when you play tennis, the ball can only bounce once. So the ball came over, and then as Cam Norrie runs to the net, the ball hit the ground twice. Everybody saw it. But the thing about the French Open is that they don't agree with having electronic surveillance.
VAR?
Well, it's kind of your VAR or anything like that. It has to be done by the line judges and the umpire. So everybody seemed to have seen the ball bounce twice, including Cam, probably, although he denied it. If you're going to play it twice, you kind of know. And so the crowd get on his back, and he could have easily said, actually, it bounced twice. But he didn't say that. So he won the point, went on to win the match. But he said that maybe they should be using cameras more for judging. But
he's looking quite good, though, isn't he?
He is, yeah. I mean, he's the only one we've got left. I mean, we had no women in the French Open at all, but we're not great on clay. So slowly but surely, you know, he's moving his way through. So it's Lorenzo Massetti from Italy in the next round, so moves to round 3. So he's doing OK. He's doing OK. He's going to win the crowd over.
Should we talk cricket?
Yeah, absolutely. Cricket is back. We mentioned it yesterday, playing Ireland, and it's a first test before the Ashes. And, you know, it's all about the way that England play. And it's a very exciting style of cricket, which, you know, Ellie, is called...
Bazball.
What is a Bazball? I was reading that. What is that?
Well, Baz is Brendan McCullum. He's the coach, so they nickname him Baz. Ben Stokes is the captain, and it's kind of... And they hate the phrase. So if you ever go to a press conference and say, oh, by the way, Bazball, they're like, don't mention Bazball, don't mention Bazball. But what it is, it's just a style. It's OK for us to mention, but don't say it in front of Brendan McCullum. So basically, it's the style is go out there. It's like this swashbuckling style. It's almost like reinventing cricket, and it's so exciting. And for those that don't enjoy Test cricket, it's turning everything around. And the Australians will be thinking, oh, you know, Bazball, we can deal with this. But it's just a very exciting way. And it's also telling people to go out and play without fear. It's one of the big things in professional sport. There's so much pressure. But they're saying, listen, we don't want you to worry about the fact you may get dropped for the next game, for the next test. Go out and play and go and hit the ball as hard as you can. And it's really exciting. And that's essentially what Bazball is.
And also the Aussies are known for throwing all sorts of obscenities. So Bazball could be handled. There's a lot worse that could be said.
There is, yeah. I would always maybe... we'll put it this way, Pete. My respect for you means I would never dream of saying anything bad about the Aussies.
Mate.
It's true.
What a great man. What about when you leave?
I'm going to be a nightmare. I'm slagging you off and slagging the Aussies off. I'll be a nightmare.
Thanks, Coity. Really good to see you.
Mate. Thank you. Right, stay with us as Al Pacino prepares to welcome his 4th child at the age of 83. We'll ask, are older parents selfish? Freddie Gray and Nikki Hodgson have their say coming up next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. The time is 8:39 on the nose. Let's bring you up to date with today's front pages.
The Telegraph focuses on more than 50 Tory MPs demanding Rishi Sunak scraps inheritance tax, which they claim is morally wrong.
The Times says Britain will target Turkey and Bulgaria in an effort to tackle the small boats crisis as the PM urges European leaders to make illegal migration their top priority.
The Mail continues its coverage of the This Morning meltdown as ITV are forced to order an independent inquiry into the relationship between Philip Schofield and his younger lover.
The Express claim animal rising activists are planning to ruin this weekend's Epsom Derby.
And The Sun believe Harry and Meghan have decided to stop their TV and book sniping and will no longer publicly criticise the royal family.
Yeah. Will there be peace at last? Not sure about that one. Well, joining us to go through the papers today is Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and author Nikki Hodgson. Really good to see you both this morning. And Freddie, it seems like every day at the moment there's a news story about AI. We're talking about one in The Guardian today.
AI is the story of 2023. There's even artificial intelligence writing articles about artificial intelligence. But the story today is that Rishi Sunak, who's going to Washington next week, to meet Joe Biden, is going to propose to Joe Biden that Britain will be the sort of centre of global regulation on artificial intelligence. Clearly, Rishi Sunak, who has quite a good business brain, knows that this is going to be the future of a lot of business. And so it would be good if London or the rest of Britain can be the place that makes key decisions on where AI is going. And can Britain be a leading player in AI? We don't have a particularly natural advantage in it, but we do have some quite good tech. So it's not a bad idea from Rishi Sunak.
So ironically, though, you almost need AI to tell you how to regulate AI because, and I know that sounds silly, but it's moving at such a rapid pace. How could you regulate that? I mean,
yes.
How?
I asked Chatbot to write an article in the style of Freddie Gray at The Spectator and it did a much better job than I could do.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, it didn't.
Oh.
I'm being falsely modest.
It could never be as good as me.
That one, didn't we fell for it.
But it was not bad. And I think in a couple of years it will probably...
Was it kind of scary? Could you see yourself in AI?
So I write these bluffers guides that they're meant to be funny. I'm not sure if they are. And someone said you should do one about artificial intelligence. So it's sort of 10 handy phrases for bluffing your way through a conversation on artificial intelligence. And I started writing it, and I was thinking, this isn't very funny. And then I thought it'd be funny to ask artificial intelligence to do it. And it did a pretty good job.
Do you know what? I saw something terrifying on the taxi ride in today. I was reading an article about an AI girlfriend, and it's basically a chatbot at this stage, but she would talk to you in the style of a girlfriend. Like, honey, how was your day? How was work?
This tech has been around for a long time, though. You know, I mean, when I was writing a sex column for Men's Health, I had to look at real dolls, you know, like the dolls, you know what they are, obviously, the dolls that look like women that people buy. And, yeah, it's obvious you just kind of include AI and then, do you actually need a real-life partner if you're of a certain non-emotional persuasion?
Do you remember the Ashley Madison, was it called? The adultery site?
Yes.
And when it was revealed that 80% of the women on there were actually bots, so men were cheating on their wives with bots.
Oh, so it somehow made it less serious for lots of people.
I mean, OK, that's a debate in itself. But we won't go into that. But on a medical side, for example, if robots were used in the future to help the elderly, to give them the medicine, to talk to them, to understand when they need to go for a walk and talk to them when they're feeling down. I know it sounds artificial, but surely there's going to be some huge benefits in the medical world.
Oh, no, I'm all for robot carers because elderly care is the biggest social issue of our time in many ways. And so if we can get the bots to do it, I think fine. I'm quite looking forward to being sort of having my bottom wiped by a robot.
Well, I mean, look, if robots could do all the non-human elements, the non-emotional elements, and then actually carers could go in and just talk to somebody, that would be amazing.
You don't want to get carers out of a job. You know, they still love their job as well. Yeah. OK. Nikki. Al Pacino, baby, 83.
Yes, he's going to be a dad in the next month at the age of 83. He's already got 2 grown-up children, and this is with his new girlfriend. So there's a bit of a debate today online and in the papers about how old is too old to be a dad. I mean, I've just had a baby. She's 3.5 months now. My husband is nearly 50, and that's considered quite old, but I probably wouldn't have let him get any older. Only from the practical side of you need a partner to be fit and well. And obviously, you know, there are kind of more risks inherent with having an older father, especially around autism and things like that. But, you know, the romantic in me says live and let live. If somebody wants to have a baby with an older partner, why not?
And just to confirm, 50 isn't old. I'm just saying. But OK, so, you know, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, my favourite actors of all time, both of them have had children recently, and people are saying, I guess the only issue, if you have to look from the outside, is to say that when the baby is 10 years old, you know, will he still be around? And that's the sad side of it, isn't it?
I mean, that's the issue. My dad was an older dad as well, and he died 10 years ago, and I was 30, but I felt that was too young to lose him. So, you know, the idea that as a child you might not even get to kind of finish school and your dad dies, that would be the kind of clincher for me. So, yeah.
Where's the threshold, then? When does becoming too old become selfish for becoming a parent, do you think?
I don't really have very strong views about this.
Do you not?
I'm just struck by...
Well, you don't think 83?
I mean, obviously, you know, every child deserves a father, and if your dad's 83, you're not going to have a father for very long, and that's sad. But also, you know, that child will have a life and could be very happy. And he'll be Al Pacino's son, which might have benefits. But I'm just struck by Al Pacino's virility, having a child at 83.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Al Pacino must drink a lot of cappuccino.
I'll just be with my bot when I'm 83.
Freddie, you might be reading books as well.
Yes.
There's a book boom, according to the Times.
This is a very story, I think, because you've been talking a lot about social media this morning and children and so on. What's the best way to get children away from social media? And the answer is books, physical books. And Bloomsbury have announced this year they've had their best ever financial year. Profits are up a large amount, and 70% of those profits are from physical books. And so I think this is encouraging. So Bloomsbury published Harry Potter and so on. Children are reading more. And I think all parents know this, that it's a great thing to get your child into reading because it takes them away from screens, it's good for their concentration, it develops all their synapses and so on. So some good news from Bloomsbury.
Do your kids read? They like to
They
read?
do. So the two youngest especially, they love their books. And Emily, my wife's a lot stricter than I am with social media, with tablets and things like that. So they're only allowed to have it on the weekends.
Yeah.
And only in the morning. And I'm like, well, that's a bit harsh. And she said, you watch. Give it a couple of weeks and you watch. And now they play, they read, they love reading. And actually, it's made me think, what happened to reading,
Yeah.
Oh, such a joy in reading as well. Do your kids
Physical
read?
book.
Well, there's nothing more satisfying than seeing my eldest reads a lot, and he gets completely absorbed in the book.
Oh.
And it's great to see him do it, because
How old is
otherwise
he?
he's completely absorbed. He's 12. And otherwise he's getting absorbed in computer games, which, you know, worries me. Although, I mean, I got absorbed in computer games, so I can't really talk.
But you also read books. You've got to do the both, haven't you? Because my concentration is shot these days. And I'm a writer. I write and I don't read enough. And that's just really a problem.
Yeah.
I'm writing a new book at the minute and just thinking, well, how much reading have I done this year? Not very much. So I'm similarly going to be strict with my daughter. She's already got books, actually, at the age of 3.5 months. So we're introducing her to the concept of books and, you know, sitting down with basic words and stuff.
Well, both of you stay with us because this leads very nicely onto our next story, and we do really want to get your opinion on it as well, because parents often find it difficult to know how to best discipline their child, with many never wanting to resort to shouting or physical discipline.
But parent and expert Dr. Marianne says she knows how to keep our children on the straight and narrow. I'll be interested in this.
Yeah, Dr. Marianne, you are on the line with us now. So tell us, what's the best way to discipline our kids?
Well, I think for a starter, we've got to get rid of this concept of discipline, because I think discipline is about punishment, and I don't think it's instructive. So I think it's about reframing this whole concept and actually teaching our children about consequences. Life is about consequences constantly. We make choices. Sometimes there are good consequences. Sometimes there are not so good consequences. So I think it's definitely shifting the way that we view discipline and actually considering it from the perspective of consequence.
I mean, it seems as though you have a very Montessori approach to discipline. So you would like to speak to children as though they are mini adults and speak to them that they make their own decisions and those decisions have consequences.
Yeah, this isn't, I mean, to be clear, I'm not about being permissive and letting children just do whatever they want, whenever they want. We, as parents, are the CEOs of our families. We lay the foundations. We teach them values. We teach them what's important within our family. But when we're talking about discipline, it's not just what do we do in the moment when our child makes a poor choice. It's what are we teaching them in the background, the education, helping them understand why we have values at home around play, around reading, around honesty, about trustworthiness. So it's both of those things. So we're allowing them to make choices within a framework, and we're teaching them what the consequence is when they've not necessarily made the best choice in that moment.
What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I really believe in boundaries with children. I mean, obviously, I've got a little baby, so, you know, discipline isn't so much of an issue just at the minute. But for me, it's really a matter of explaining what you can afford to explain, realising that children are very led by emotions, not by reason, up until a certain point, and kind of sitting with them with their feelings. So, you know, if a child's crying about something, you've got to let them feel that feeling and then say, OK, but now we're going to do X, Y or Z instead. You know, I mean, I was brought up with a lot of shouting at home. My mum won't mind me saying that. And I was actually quite scared of my mum shouting. It definitely got me to do certain things. But me and my brother would always say that we lived in a kind of, you know, we lived in fear of the next shouting episode. And I don't think it's necessary, really.
OK. Freddie, what do you make of Dr. Marianne and her approach?
Well, I think the key thing is following through on threats, right? If you threaten a child with a punishment, you've got to do the punishment. Just as if you offer them a reward, you've got to give them the reward. But I say that as though that's something I do, and I don't. I'm terrible at it.
Are you?
I'm a terrible disciplinarian. In fact, I actually heard my daughter talking to a friend of hers the other day. She didn't know I was listening. And she was saying, thing is, I'll just get Daddy to do whatever I want.
She's got you wrapped.
Because I'm very, very bad at discipline. It doesn't come naturally to me. I've always hated being disciplined. As a child, I hated being disciplined. Yeah. I reacted against it very badly.
And do you think that's why you then don't want to discipline children that way?
My problem is I also have a temper. So I go from, 0 to 10 on the temper scale very fast. And I don't really have a in-between. I'd like to have like a firm, 8, where they know that I'm cross. but I'm not actually screaming. I haven't got that setting.
Don't feel like you've got that balance just yet. Well, Dr. Marion, we want to bring you back in at this stage. Some really interesting thoughts there. What do you make of those?
Well, can I just address a couple of the things? When we think back, so many of us, to our own childhoods, there was lots of shouting, there was probably quite a lot of smacking. But when we're talking about children making good choices, we want them to make choices not from fear, but because they understand why they need to do that. We've got to remember parenting is around raising mini adults. Our children are going to go out into the world, get jobs, meet partners, have a home. So it's really important that they're doing the right thing, not from fear, but because they understand. And consistency is absolutely crucial. If we say one thing and we're not consistent with it, we don't follow through, then it's this whole kind of flip-flop approach, and our children think, oh, well, this is a new thing that they're saying and there's no point listening because they're not going to follow it through.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, I copped to hiding when I was a kid, we all copped hiding, not even at home, but at school. We used to get the cane. The deputy head gave us what they called the plimsoll pudding, where they hit us with plimsolls, right? But then when my kids, and I don't agree with that side of it at all, and even though it did no harm to me personally, because I grew up with that real discipline, I think you're absolutely right about doing it out of fear rather than out of knowing why. Now that I've got children, I've never raised my hand to them, and I've always thought, will they still respect me the same way? And they do. And you're right, it's about talking. Well, I think you're right. I should just say that. But it's about talking to them and treating them as humans, but also being firm and following through what you say you're going to do, I think. If you take that iPad away, you take it away. You don't say, I'll take it off you, and then 5 minutes later you're on a phone call somewhere else and you've forgotten about it.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think when we're talking about this idea about consequences, it's about making sure that the consequences sort of match the misdemeanor. There's something instructive about it. I think as parents, we often feel that the only tool that we've got that we know our children are going to be really disappointed if they lose are their devices. So they don't get ready for bed. So we tell them, right, OK, that's it. You can't have your device tomorrow. It's not related. So I think when we're trying to be instructive and teach our children so that they make better choices next time, let's try and make sure that the consequence matches the misdemeanor and is related. And then they're much more likely to understand, oh, OK, the reason why I need to do that is because of this. And they tie in together.
That's a really good point, actually. The other thing, I guess, with food as well, I mean, if you say, instead of saying if you have your broccoli, you can have a chocolate, it means that you're almost saying broccoli is horrible, but I'll give you what you want if you have something horrible. And so the association is not good. I get your point.
Yeah, it is just about I think it's just about being consistent. If we're always thinking with the end in mind, we're trying to raise adults that are confident and capable and make their own good choices, then we ask ourselves, is this consequence going to instruct and teach them or not?
Dr. Marion, really, really good to have you with us this morning. Thank you so much for your expertise. And Freddie and Nikki, thank you so much for staying and giving your views too. Do stay with us. We'll have more on Boris Johnson's challenge to the Prime Minister as the deadline to hand over pandemic WhatsApps approaches.
But first, here's your forecast with Alex Deakin.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a dull start for most of us, but I'm reasonably optimistic that for many, grey skies will turn blue through the day today. Thanks to this, a chunky area of high pressure which has been dominating our weather all week and will continue to control our weather into next week, keeping things mostly dry. Now, out there this morning, the cloud is thick enough in places for a little bit of light rain and drizzle, and the cloud has moved in across much of the country through the night, but West Wales, northwest Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland having a sunny start, and the cloud will retreat back to the east through the day. So the Midlands, southern parts of England, northwest England, southern Scotland, all brightening up, but this eastern coast may well stay pretty glum and pretty chilly with a breeze coming in from the sea. Elsewhere, further west, top temperatures getting into the low 20s once more, feeling pretty pleasant with fairly light winds. Now, through this evening and overnight, look what happens. The cloud comes back in overnight, back in across the Midlands, into southern Scotland, eventually into Wales and western parts of England as well. Clearer skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, may allow a bit of mist and fog. And it's here where we'll see the lowest temperatures getting down into single figures, well down in some rural spots. But most places across England and Wales start tomorrow at 9 or 10, just like this morning. We'll start with a lot of cloud as well. But again, that cloud should break up quite quickly, I fancy, tomorrow through the morning. And although some parts of the east coast may stay glum, much of eastern England looking a bit brighter on Friday. Better chance of seeing lengthier spells of sunshine as we go through the day. Again, there'll still be a breeze coming in from the sea, so even if we see more sunshine, it'll still be cooler in the east. Further west, that's where, again, we'll see temperatures over 20 degrees, although generally just a degree or so down on today's values. That high pressure isn't going anywhere. It sticks around through the weekend and beyond, so a lot more dry weather to come, even well into next week. Goodbye.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Boris Boris Johnson piles pressure on the Prime Minister as he hands over his pandemic WhatsApps.
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock on Thursday, the 1st of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Ellie Costello and Peter Andre.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Rishi Sunak is facing a challenge from his predecessor, Boris Johnson, to hand over pandemic WhatsApps and diaries to the COVID inquiry. Ahead of a 4 p.m. deadline today, the former PM disclosed the material to the Cabinet Office.
ITV has instructed a barrister to investigate the circumstances around Philip Schofield's exit from This Morning. The external review is expected to take months and could see Schofield grilled about his affair with a much younger colleague.
The Prime Minister will use a meeting of European leaders in Moldova today to call for a joint response to illegal migration. He will also announce a new intelligence deal with Bulgaria, a key country for people smugglers entering Europe.
And are the kids all right? Well, we're going to investigate the crisis facing the younger generation in Britain and ask the experts what can be done to put children on the right path for the future.
And we have had so many lovely messages and emails today, so do keep them coming in. We're going to share some of them with you a little bit later on in the programme. gbviews@gbnews.com. Well, Boris Johnson has put pressure on the PM to hand over WhatsApps and diaries to the pandemic inquiry after he gave the materials to the Cabinet Office in full and unredacted form.
The government is on course for an unprecedented legal battle if it misses the 4 p.m. deadline to disclose the documents.
Well, let's speak now to our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. And Tom, this is a fascinating situation that we find ourselves in now. We've been talking about it for the last few days, but Boris Johnson has now very firmly put the ball in Rishi Sunak's court.
He certainly has, and it's interesting because Boris Johnson could have, if he so wished, hand this straight to the inquiry. Instead, he's handed it to the Cabinet Office, which means that this is now up to the government whether or not they give along all of this material. Boris Johnson has also said that if the inquiry wants that material from him personally, he will give it over. But he believes the right way to do it is to put it all in the hands of the Cabinet Office, all in one place, and then it all gets handed over, perhaps at 4 p.m. today. Although perhaps not. The line from the government has been over the last week or so, really, that it would be improper for every jot and tittle of every message sent by every minister over the last 2 years to go to this inquiry. Some of it, the government argues, is totally irrelevant to COVID, whether it was meetings about policy that was completely distinct from COVID, or indeed other messages that might mix the personal with the politics. And that's some of the concern that we've heard emanating from Number 10 in the last couple of days. On the part of the inquiry, however, they say they need to see everything for them to decide what's relevant. They say the government shouldn't be deciding what's relevant here. And to be fair, that is also the position now of Boris Johnson and indeed of Matt Hancock, who of course handed over all of his communications, some of which ended up on the front page of the Daily Telegraph for a few weeks. And perhaps this is what's causing a lot of politicians now to sort of row back from that position. But certainly Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock are in the full transparency camp, along with the head of the inquiry. And the government is wanting to be a bit more selective.
But, I mean, what could happen next could be hugely, well, unprecedented and significant. The government could be taking a public inquiry to court. I mean, it's unheard of.
Absolutely. When the Inquiries Act established public inquiries in the way in which they now run, they gave them huge power. This was under the last Labour government that brought in this legislation that meant that these inquiries can request basically whatever they want from basically whomever they want, and if people refuse, well, those people might, at the end of a long process, end up in prison. That's how serious we're talking about the power of these inquiries. However, the government does have a route to challenge the decision of this inquiry, and that's through what's known as judicial review. Although that would have to be done relatively speedily, this could be ending up in the High Court if that 4 p.m. deadline today is missed.
And how do you think Rishi Sunak is feeling right now?
Well, it's an interesting point because Rishi Sunak has been sort of staying away from the big discussion discussion on this. Most of it's sort of in the hands of the Secretary of State in the Cabinet Office, the Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden. He's the person who's really been wrestling with this question and who his critics have been saying he's been the one that's sort of holding back this document. He's been the keeper of the letters and the WhatsApps and all the rest of it. But of course, Rishi Sunak today is in Moldova. He's visiting a Castle Mimi, as it's known, about 20 miles away from the Ukrainian border. This is the European Political Community Summit, something that was only established last year in the wake of the invasion of Ukraine, comprising 47 European countries. Of course, the European Union is only 27 EU countries, but 47 European countries stretching from non-EU Switzerland, Norway, Ukraine, Turkey, all of these countries coming together for what is a forum of discussion rather than, as the EU is, a sort of supranational organisation that can tell countries what to do. Today, what we're seeing in a day trip for the Prime Minister in Moldova is a forum for discussion and potentially a couple of agreements, but a very distinct grouping from the European Union.
Brilliant, Tom. Really good to see you this morning. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Now, we've been talking barbecues all day because it's quite shocking, really. Over half of people have never hosted a barbecue. This is according to new research from Sainsbury's. 14% of people have never even been to one. It's got you talking this morning. Loads of you getting in touch with us. Nikki says, as a child, my dad thought he was the equivalent of Gordon Ramsay when barbecues are concerned. This resulted in me being subjected to 5 hours of torture as Dad tried to get the barbecue going, shouting at it, followed by undercooked pink raw burgers and sausages, usually served at around 10 p.m, despite Dad being out there from 5 p.m. He was wafting his tongs in the air, the garden was consumed in smoke, and it's totally put me off ever repeating the event myself. Get me an air fryer any day, says Nikki.
Brilliant, I love that.
It's a great one.
But Dave in Aberdeen, I mean, I've got a feel for Dave right now, because Dave says your barbecue segment certainly does not apply to North East Scotland. While you're all basking in the sun, remember, we don't get any up north. Barbecue in our dreams. And yes, it's raining here today. I mean, that, you know, we can't blame Dave.
No, yeah. I mean, that's tough.
That's one person, but still, there's 14% of people that have never had a barbecue. So we've still got to focus on that.
We've got to find out who you are. Diane says, hi, Ellie and Peter. After spending Christmas in Australia some 20 years ago, we decided to do our Christmas turkey and other meat on our barbecue every Christmas day. We still do that, much to the amusement of family and friends. What do you make of that?
Well, it's a really interesting thing, because in Australia, especially on the Gold Coast where we live, it's really hot on Christmas Day, and I guess the rest of Australia is. And so we used to go on the beach on Christmas Day, and you used to take cold turkey, which is bizarre.
Yeah, that is bizarre.
Yeah, so you'd cook the turkey, we'd sometimes put it in an esky full of ice, and then
What's
we'd
an
take
esky?
drinks. An esky's like a little box you put loads of ice in, put your drinks in. So people would drink beer and then have cold turkey, which is ironic, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it sounds good. Thanks for giving us insight into Aussie culture then. And yes, give us one more.
OK. Bob in Spain says, 2 faves on the old barbie. Chef Dahlia, which is a Cypriot. Yeah, it's very nice, very, very nice. Lovely herb lamb Cypriot sausages. And listen to this, skewers of banana wrapped in streaky bacon. What is with bananas on the barbie?
It's very good on a barbecue, I told you.
That's a fabulous flavour combo.
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, if you take anything today, bananas on a barbie, it's a really, really good idea.
So if you're feeling the need to get on the grills this weekend, Jack Delaney, a.k.a. The Flaming Cook, joins us now to share his top tips. So, Jack, what's your best advice that you could give us in regards to a barbie?
Well, burgers. I suppose that's probably the main starting point for a barbecue. I love burgers. There's lots of people love burgers. There isn't much you can't do with a burger. Can you hear me?
For a burger, and it's 9:10. Yes, we can hear you, Jack. Don't panic. How do you feel about this research from Sainsbury's? We found it really quite shocking today that half of people have never hosted a barbecue. 14% have never been to one. I mean, they're missing out, aren't they?
Oh, definitely. They're definitely missing out. I mean, any place that has a barbecue from a restaurant perspective, family members. You'll definitely find me there, and I find it hard to believe that people haven't attended themselves. It's bizarre.
I mean, it is the smell of summer, right? It is the smell of summer. That and tropical tanning oil, really, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. You're definitely right. I mean, like, it's the 1st of June today. I presume a lot of people are probably starting to break out their own barbecues for the first time this year. So you're right in a sense when you say it's the smell of summer. It most definitely is.
A lot of this is not just about the food, is it? It's about the coming together, as you were talking about earlier. It's the atmosphere. It's that community feel that a barbecue feels that you don't get with other sorts of meals.
Absolutely. I mean, like, from a catering perspective, you have you've got restaurants and you've got outdoor dining, which is I suppose become predominantly popular with COVID. And I suppose the effects of outdoor dining, as you mentioned, is a real community sense in terms of. You'll have people all around the table. You'll have most of the time you'll have all the actual foods on the table. So you've got a real sense of passing foods to one another, sharing, and as you say, a real type of community feel.
Really good point about the fact that you're sort of all in one spot and everyone's sharing the whole experience. You're not just off doing something and you come back just to eat the barbecue. Everyone's around. That's a really good point. Music, food,
yes,
family. What could be better, except for more food?
Exactly.
Jack, what would your advice be for people who perhaps don't have the space for a barbecue in their garden or don't have a garden at all? Because there are still options, aren't there, if you do want to barbecue?
Absolutely. I mean, like, if getting to your first point, in terms of small space, I suppose I'm going to presume that people with small areas probably don't have a barbecue to begin with, so they're probably going to be going down the road of getting a disposable barbecue because they're quite small, they're quite compact, and of course you're buying them on a once-off for a once-off period, so you can dispose of it afterwards. My only advice from that perspective would be just to be totally aware of your surroundings. I've heard so many stories of people using their disposable barbecue in a decking type area. They'll finish their barbecue, they'll go in, they might go to bed. There could be a heavy gust of wind that night and they could tip over the barbecue and you could end up with a bit of a mess afterwards.
And obviously, you've got to keep it away from clothes. Someone mentioned before that they had it going while their clothes were on the line. And of course, you know, more than the smell could happen, it could catch a light. So you've got to be careful of that. Now, obviously, you've got to clean your barbecue, right? You've got to clean it if you haven't used it for a long time. And how do you advise we clean it best?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned earlier, it's the 1st of June. As people are probably going to start getting their barbecues out for the first time this year. A lot of people probably would have put them into their sheds or their garages or wherever they stored them back in September, October, and they probably only just looked at them for the first time today or over the coming weekend. My suggestion would be that if you get yourself a wire brush, get some sort of a barbecue cleaning product and really get into it and clean off all that old food and anything that's built up on the grill itself. The most important thing to do then would be to rinse that product off. You don't want to be eating that or anything like that or contaminating your food. And once you've got that rinsed off, personally what I would like to do, what I do, and it's a good habit also to get into, is if you get an onion, you can rub the onion across the grill, because onions naturally have they're naturally acidic and they have antibacterial qualities. So not only are you seasoning your grill, you're also using those antibacterial qualities to sanitize the grill almost. And once you're finished with the onion, you can throw it into your barbecue. If you've got a charcoal barbecue, you can throw it into the barbecue, and it'll also infuse the flavors of the onion will infuse into the food. So it's
just one question. If you haven't got time to do all that, what about if you just turn the barbecue on high, let all the heat and all the power kill all the bacteria? Is that an easier way of doing it, and then just a quick wipe? I used to do that. I don't know how safe that is, but
I mean, it's. I'm sure we've all been guilty of it, but I mean,
maybe not.
The safest thing to do really is to start, especially when it's the first time you're bringing it out.
Okay.
I suppose if you're a regular user of your barbecue, I suppose you could take that stance. But for the first time breaking it out this year, I most definitely would give it a clean with some sort of product.
Okay.
Thank you, Jack Delaney. Thank you so much.
Yeah, really good to see you this morning, Jack. Thanks so much. Feeling inspired to start a barbecue, aren't we? I could listen to his accent all day as well.
Right.
Right, To The Point is coming up at 9:30. Andrew Pearce and Dawn Neeson are standing by. What's coming up on today's show?
Well, morning to you. Breaking news. We're going to be talking about the Labour MP who's been suspended by the party over allegations of sexual harassment against 5 much younger women.
One of them was just 19.
Not a great look for Labour.
Is back.
It certainly is. And talking of Pestminster, we can talk about Philip Schofield.
Yes.
Ongoing.
That's gone legal. It's gone legal.
An inquiry being set up by ITV.
Bit of broils.
Harry's putting a sock in it.
Harry and Meghan are going quiet. They're not going to say anything. They're not going to write anything.
I don't believe them.
It'll last till the end of the programme, possibly.
Until they need some money.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And
Boris Johnson.
Boris Johnson. Talking of Boris Johnson, we're talking of dads as well. How old is too old to be a dad?
83. Al
83,
Pacino.
Al Pacino.
No fool like an old fool. No fool like an old fool, Al.
Talking about yourself, are you again, love?
Thank you.
And of course, it's flaming June. Happy June, 1st of June, and the weather is
Terrible.
autumnal. All that coming up, and much, much more. It is
Brilliant.
Few What Sculpture.
Oh, brilliant. Andrew and Dawn, really good to see you. It's a packed programme, lots to look forward to coming up at 9:30.
Yep, stay with us as Rishi Sunak targets Bulgaria and Turkey in a bid to stop the small boat. We'll ask Labour about their plans to solve the migration crisis, coming up next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. The time is 9:20. We're joined now by Shadow Immigration Minister Stephen Kinnock. Good morning to you, Stephen. Very good to see you this morning. But some very concerning breaking news in the past few minutes about the Labour MP, Geraint Davies. He has been suspended by the Labour Party. Very concerning allegations regarding 5 women, the youngest being 19, allegations of sexual harassment, physical and verbal. Very, very concerning allegations. What's your response to them?
Well, good morning and thanks for having me on the show. These are deeply troubling allegations, and I really do hope that the women affected do come forward and make formal complaints, because it's quite difficult to move the complaints process forward without those formal complaints. But I am also very pleased that the Labour Party has taken swift action and suspended Geraint's membership, which means automatic suspension of the whip as well, pending the investigation and getting clarity on what has taken place.
I mean, this is very concerning, as you say, troubling behaviour from a party who believe they are in waiting. There'll be people at home wondering if this is the sort of behaviour that is present within the Labour Party.
Well, I've been a member of Parliament since 2015 and a lifelong member of the Labour Party, and I can assure you that the vast majority of party members and MPs are just great and lovely people who want to make the world a better place and believe passionately in our values and principles. Of course, if there are things going on which should not be going on, that is completely unacceptable. And as I say, I'm very pleased that our whips and Keir Starmer have taken very swift action to suspend Geraint's membership of the Labour Party pending investigation.
OK, well, Rishi Sunak is in Moldova today. He is targeting Bulgaria in Turkey in a bid to stop the small boats. He's also been focusing on the Channel as well, hasn't he? One of his 5 promises is to stop the small boats. What's Labour's plan to solve the migration crisis?
Well, a lot of it is about fixing the Tory mess. They've completely lost control of immigration and asylum. We've got a massive backlog, and some research that we've published today shows that the cost of asylum has rocketed from 550 million when Labour left office in 2010 to 2.1 billion now, and rising all the time. So we need to scrap the Rwanda plan because it's unworkable, unethical and extremely expensive, and use that money to fund much more expertise in the National Crime Agency to really go after these criminal gangs. We need to clear the asylum backlog by increasing the seniority of asylum decision makers and caseworkers in the Home Office to really clear this backlog, which is costing £6 million a day in hotel bills. We need to get a much better relationship with our European partners and neighbours so that we can get a returns deal in place. And of course, we need to get the safe and legal routes, the family resettlement routes working properly, because a lot of the people, for example, Afghans, who we owe a debt of honour and gratitude to them, we're not enabling them to come on safe and legal routes, so they're getting on the small boats. So it's a huge mess that we're going to be taking over if and when we get into government after the next general election. But with hard graft and quiet diplomacy and common sense, I genuinely think that we can crack the problem.
Touch there upon the cost of asylum hotels being £6 million a day. It's not an easy problem to fix. I mean, the government has suggested barges, they've suggested military bases, that you're then up against local campaigners, local communities who are very concerned about that. So what are Labour's plans in terms of where you would house asylum seekers and migrants?
Well, as I say, we're going to inherit a complete mess, and those hotels and other contingency accommodation is going to need to continue until we have got hold of the backlog and got it down. Fundamentally, this goes back to the backlog because there's a certain amount of distributed accommodation, which is appropriate and good accommodation, not hotels. But once your backlog goes above that number, which is now way, way above that number, then you're having to put people into hotels. So by getting fast track processing of high grant rate.
We've lost.
Yeah, it looks as though we've just lost Stephen Kinnock there, but really, really good to have him on the programme, and of course to react to those breaking news there about the Labour MP Geraint Davis, who has been suspended from the party following those incredibly serious allegations concerning 5 women, the youngest being 19, allegations of sexual harassment, both physical and verbal. So very, very good to have his response to that on the programme. But that's it from us this morning. Thank you for joining us, Peter. It's been absolutely fabulous to be with you the past 2 days. I'll be back tomorrow from 6 a.m. with Martin Daubney. Up next, it's Andrew and Dawn with To The Point.
Morning. Well, we're going to be talking more about that Labour MP, Geraint Davis. He's been in the Commons since 1997. Allegations of excessive drinking, touching,
groping,
and sexual
yeah, absolutely.
comments.
Yeah, it's a big breaking news story, and we have got all the inside information on it, including first-hand information of the drinking culture, what it's actually like being in the corridors of
There's
power.
an awful lot of boozing and an awful lot of bars in Parliament, and we'll tell you just how much the beers and drinks are subsidised by you, the taxpayer.
Yes, exactly, yeah, and lots more coming up on an amazing packed show.
Yeah.
I said breaking news, and it's the first day of June as well, and we're all enjoying this scorching summer weather.
Came here in my winter coat and my woolies, and I've got my thermals out of the cupboard.
And of course, we have got more on Schofield, and Harry and Meghan have promised not to write any more books or do any more TV programmes.
And we don't believe them.
No, funny enough, by the end of the show, they'll probably have another interview out, won't they?
Exactly.
All of that coming up on